When a billionaire heiress showed up at a broke rancher's door at midnight with a marriage contract and 72 hours to sign it, he thought she was insane. When she explained that refusing meant losing everything her dead father built to the brother who'd already hired bulldozers, he realized she was desperate. Victoria Langford didn't need a husband, she needed a shield. Ethan Cole didn't need complications, he needed to keep his lights on. But sometimes the worst decisions make the best stories. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this wild ride travels. Now let's get into it. The rain hit the Montana dirt like bullets. Ethan Cole stood at his kitchen sink past midnight, hands braced against the counter, staring at the stack of overdue bills that seemed to multiply every time he blinked. The fluorescent light above him flickered, had been flickering for 3 weeks now, but replacing it meant spending money he didn't have on a problem that wasn't killing him yet. Outside, the wind hammered against the farmhouse walls, rattling windows that needed caulking before winter really hit. His daughter's bedroom door was cracked open down the hall. 8 years old. Asleep for 2 hours now, finally, after the bedtime routine that had turned into a negotiation about whether stuffed animals counted as vegetables if you pretended hard enough. The kind of conversation that made him feel like maybe he wasn't completely screwing this up. Then someone pounded on his front door. Not knocked. Pounded. Ethan's first thought was that the bank had gotten aggressive about collections. His second thought was that nobody with good news showed up at this hour. He glanced toward his daughter's room, then moved quickly to the door before whoever it was woke her up. He flipped the porch light and pulled the door open. Standing in the rain was a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine and directly into the wrong life. She was drenched. Expensive coat, he could tell it was expensive even soaked through. Dark hair plastered to her face, heels that had no business being anywhere near a working ranch. She was breathing hard, like she'd been running, and in her hands she clutched a leather folder that was taking the worst of the storm. "Ethan Cole?" Her voice cut through the rain, sharp and clear. He didn't move from the doorway. "Who's asking?" "My name is Victoria Langford." She said it like he should recognize it. He didn't. "I need to talk to you. Now. It's midnight. I'm aware of the time. And you're on my porch." "Also aware." She wiped rain from her face with the back of her hand, smearing what was left of her makeup. "Are you going to let me in, or are we doing this out here?" Ethan studied her for a long moment. Rich. Definitely rich. That coat probably cost more than his truck. But there was something in her eyes that wasn't entitlement. It was closer to panic, barely controlled. "5 minutes," he said, stepping aside. She moved past him into the small entryway, dripping immediately onto the worn floorboards. She looked around the space, the cracked drywall, the couch with the duct-taped armrest, the pile of his daughter's drawings on the coffee table, and something crossed her face that might have been judgment or might have been something else entirely. "You want a towel?" Ethan asked. "I want you to listen." He closed the door against the wind. I'm listening." Victoria set the leather folder on the coffee table and opened it with hands that shook slightly. She pulled out papers, legal documents, by the look of them, and turned to face him directly. "My father died 6 weeks ago," she said. Her voice didn't waver, but her jaw was tight. "Harold Langford. He owned the Langford Ranch, 30,000 acres bordering your property to the east. Cattle operation, some agricultural holdings, mineral rights, worth about $400 million, give or take." Ethan knew the Langford spread. Everyone in the county knew it. It was the kind of operation that made his few hundred acres look like a hobby farm. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said carefully, "but I'm not sure what that has to do with me at midnight." "My father's will had conditions." Victoria's fingers tightened on the papers. "Specifically, it states that control of the ranch and all associated assets transfers to me on one condition. I have to be married before Friday. This Friday, 3 days from now." Ethan stared at her. "That's insane." "That's Harold Langford." Something bitter crossed her face. "He spent 30 years disappointed I wasn't the son he wanted. Guess he figured marriage was the only way to make sure I'd—" She stopped, shook her head. "Doesn't matter. The point is, if I'm not married by Friday at 5 p.m., everything transfers to my brother Damien instead. So marry someone." "You think I haven't tried?" Her voice cracked slightly before she caught it. "I called every man I've ever dated. Every business associate who owed my father a favor. Everyone. You know what they all said? They said Damien already got to them, bought them off, threatened them, promised them deals if they stayed away from me. My own brother is systematically destroying every option I have because the second he gets control, he's selling the entire ranch to a development group out of California. 30,000 acres of Montana land turned into luxury vacation homes for tech millionaires. The wind rattled the windows. Ethan crossed his arms. Still not hearing what this has to do with me. Victoria took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier, but there was an edge of desperation underneath. You're a single father, widowed 3 years ago. You run a small cattle operation that's barely breaking even. You've got a daughter, Emma, 8 years old, and you're about 6 months from losing everything to the bank. She saw his expression shift and kept going. Don't look surprised. I did my research. I needed someone Damien couldn't buy or threaten, someone who has no connection to my family's world, someone who needs money badly enough to take a risk. Ethan's jaw tightened. You want to buy yourself a husband. I want to save my father's legacy from being turned into a real estate investment. Victoria's eyes locked on his. And yes, I'm willing to pay for it. Marry me on Thursday. Show up to the estate hearing on Friday. Stay legally married for 1 year while I consolidate control and make sure Damien can't challenge the inheritance. After that, we divorce, you get $5 million, and we never have to see each other again. The number hit him like cold water, $5 million. He could pay off the ranch, replace every piece of broken equipment, hire actual help instead of doing everything himself. Set up a college fund for Emma that would cover anything she wanted to do. Stop living month to month, crisis to crisis, one bad season from complete collapse. You're serious, he said quietly. Completely. You don't even know me. I know you're honest. I know you've never missed a child support payment, even when the bank was calling. I know your neighbors say you'd give someone your last dollar if they needed it. Victoria's voice softened slightly. I know you're a good father. That matters more than anything else. Ethan looked at the papers on his coffee table, then at the woman standing in his living room dripping rainwater onto floors that had seen better decades. This is crazy, he said. I'm aware. Your brother's going to come after me. After us. Probably. And you think 1 year of pretending is going to be enough to stop him? Victoria's expression hardened. I think 1 year gives me enough time to prove I can run that ranch better than Damien ever could. After that, it won't matter what he tries. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Every logical part of his brain was screaming that this was a terrible idea. That getting involved with billionaire family drama was a recipe for disaster. That there were too many ways this could blow up in his face. But $5 million. And something else. Something in the way Victoria was standing there, trying to hold herself together, that reminded him of the feeling of watching everything you built start to crumble and knowing you were out of options. I need conditions, he said. Victoria blinked. What? If we're doing this, I need conditions. First, Emma doesn't get dragged into whatever war you've got going with your brother. She's 8. This doesn't touch her. Agreed. Second, we're honest with each other. I'm not playing games or pretending to be something I'm not. You want a fake marriage, fine, but we're straight with each other about what this is. Done. Victoria pulled a pen from her bag. Anything else? Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, one more thing. If at any point this puts my daughter in danger, any point at all, the deal's off and I walk. Money or no money. Victoria met his eyes. I wouldn't expect anything less. She held out the pen. Ethan took it. Ebet. The morning after felt surreal. Ethan stood in his bathroom, shaving with a razor that had seen too many uses, trying to process the fact that in 48 hours he was supposed to marry a woman he'd met 12 hours ago. The papers Victoria left were sitting on his kitchen counter. He'd read them 3 times after she left, looking for the trap, the clause that would screw him over. It was surprisingly straightforward. Marriage on Thursday. Attend estate hearing Friday. Maintain legal marriage for 12 months. Payment of $5 million transferred in installments. $1 million up front, the rest quarterly. Divorce after 1 year, clean separation, no additional obligations. His phone rang. Unknown number. Yeah? Mr. Cole. A man's voice smooth and cold. My name is Damien Langford. I believe you met my sister last night. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Word travels fast. In some circles. Damien's tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. I wanted to reach out personally, sister to brother-in-law, so to speak. I think there's been a misunderstanding. That's so. Victoria is, well, she's grieving. Our father's death hit her hard. She's not thinking clearly. This marriage idea of hers is just desperation talking. A pause. I'd hate to see a good man like yourself get caught up in something that's only going to end badly. Appreciate the concern. I'm serious, Mr. Cole. Victoria's playing a game she can't win. The ranch is too big. The debt's too deep. The problem's too complex. She'll fail, and when she does, anyone attached to her is going down too. Damien's voice dropped. But it doesn't have to be that way. Walk away now, and I'll make sure you're compensated for your trouble. Say $200,000 for your time and discretion. Ethan looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. Tired eyes, 3-day stubble. The face of a man who'd been offered a bribe before he'd even had his morning coffee. Here's the thing, Mr. Langford, Ethan said slowly. I already made a deal, and I don't break my word. Everyone breaks their word for the right price. Then I guess you don't know me very well. He hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Ethan ignored it. He finished shaving, got dressed, and went to wake Emma for school. Thursday came faster than it should have. The courthouse in town was a brick building that had been old when Ethan was a kid and hadn't improved with time. He stood outside in the parking lot, wearing the one suit he owned, the same one he'd worn to his wife Sarah's funeral 3 years ago, and wondered what the hell he was doing. A black car pulled up. Not flashy, but expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. Victoria stepped out wearing a simple dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back. She looked like she hadn't slept. You came, she said. Said I would. They stood there for a moment in the autumn sunlight, two people about to legally bind themselves together for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. We can still back out, Victoria said quietly. If you've changed your mind, have you? No? Then let's get this done. The ceremony took 11 minutes. There was no music, no flowers, no guests. Just a judge who'd clearly done this 1,000 times and didn't care about the story behind it. Ethan repeated words that felt strange in his mouth. Victoria's hands were cold when they exchanged rings, simple gold bands she'd bought that morning. You may kiss the bride, the judge said, sounding bored. They looked at each other. Victoria leaned in slightly and Ethan met her halfway. It was brief, awkward, nothing like the kiss at his first wedding when he'd been 23 and stupid in love. Congratulations, the judge said. Next. They signed papers, made it official, walked out of the courthouse as legally married strangers. In the parking lot, Victoria turned to him. I have movers bringing my things to your place this afternoon, she said. I'll try to stay out of the way. It's a small house, I noticed. Emma gets home from school at 3:30. I'll talk to her before you arrive. Try to explain. He stopped. Hell, I don't even know what I'm going to say. Tell her the truth, that I needed help, and you're good enough to provide it. Victoria's expression softened slightly. Kids understand more than we think. Yeah, well, she's been through enough changes. I don't want this to be another thing that hurts her. It won't be. I promise. Ethan wanted to believe that. He wasn't sure he did. They drove separately back to the ranch. Ethan got there first and sat in his truck for a while, looking at the house he'd barely been able to hold on to, trying to figure out how to explain to his 8-year-old daughter that they now had a roommate who was technically her stepmother. Emma was at the kitchen table doing homework when he came in. She looked up, saw his suit, frowned. Why are you dressed weird? She asked. Ethan sat down across from her. I need to talk to you about something, kiddo. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. He took a breath. You know how sometimes people need help? Like when Mrs. Henderson broke her leg and we helped with her groceries. Emma nodded slowly. Well, there's a woman named Victoria who needed help with something important, legal stuff, grown-up stuff, and I agreed to help her. Okay. The thing is, the way I'm helping her means she's going to be living here with us for a while. Maybe a year. Emma's eyes went wide. Like a roommate? Sort of. Actually, Ethan struggled with how to say it. Actually, we got married today, legally, but it's not like It's complicated, Em. It's a arrangement to help her with family problems. It doesn't change anything between you and me. His daughter stared at him. You married someone I never met. I know it sounds crazy. Is she nice? The question caught him off guard. I think so. Yeah. Does she like kids? I don't know yet. Emma considered this with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could manage. Is she going to try to be my mom? Ethan's chest tightened. No, sweetheart. Nobody's ever going to replace your mom. This is different. Victoria's just someone who needs a place to stay while she works through some stuff. Okay. Emma went back to her homework. Can she help me with math? You're bad at fractions. Hey, you are, Dad. You always get mad at the denominator. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. Yeah, okay. Maybe she can help with math. The movers arrived at 4 o'clock. Ethan watched from the porch as they unloaded what looked like half of a luxury apartment into his modest farmhouse. Expensive luggage, boxes labeled with things like office files and winter wardrobe, a laptop case that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. Victoria supervised quietly, directing traffic, looking increasingly out of place among the worn furniture and cracked linoleum. Emma watched from the living room window, curious but cautious. When the movers finally left, Victoria stood in the middle of the living room surrounded by her belongings and looked completely lost. The spare bedroom's upstairs, Ethan said. It's not big, but it's got a door that closes. Thank you. Bathroom's shared, hot water's temperamental, and the floorboards creak, so if you're walking around at night, I'll be quiet. Victoria looked at Emma, who was still watching from the hallway. Hi, you must be Emma. Emma didn't move. Are you really married to my dad? Legally, yes. But not really. Victoria glanced at Ethan, then back at Emma. It's complicated. But I promise I'm not here to make things harder for you. Do you know fractions? A pause. Yes. Good. Dad's terrible at them. Victoria's lips twitched slightly. I'll keep that in mind. The first week was brutal, not because of fights or drama, but because of the silence. The careful navigation of two strangers trying to share space without actually interacting. Ethan kept to his routine. Up at 5, coffee, morning chores, get Emma ready for school, work the ranch until dark, collapse into bed by 9. Victoria stayed mostly in her room, working on her laptop, making phone calls in a low voice about ranch business he didn't understand. They were polite. Painfully polite. Morning? Coffee's fresh? Thanks? That was about the extent of it. Emma was the one who forced them into the same room. Homework at the kitchen table became a shared activity, with Victoria helping with math while Ethan made dinner. The first time Victoria explained long division in a way that actually made sense, Emma looked at her father with an expression that clearly said, "See?" "Don't get cocky," Ethan muttered. "I'm 8. I don't know what that means." "It means don't rub it in." Victoria hid a smile behind her coffee cup. Small moments. That's all it was. Small moments of proximity that didn't mean anything, except they were 3 people sharing a house and trying not to step on each other. Then the news broke. Ethan was in town getting feed when his phone started buzzing. Text messages, voicemails, all from people he'd known his entire life, all asking the same question. What the hell was he thinking? He pulled up the local newspaper's website and felt his stomach drop. The headline, Local Rancher Marries Langford Heiress in Surprise Ceremony. Below it, a photo. Someone had caught them leaving the courthouse. And below that, quotes. Anonymous sources saying Ethan was clearly after her money, that the marriage was a sham, that Victoria was slumming it with a broke single father because she was desperate. And then, a quote from Damian Langford himself. I'm concerned for my sister's well-being. Mr. Cole has significant financial troubles, and I worry Victoria's grief has made her vulnerable to someone who sees an opportunity. I hope for her sake this isn't the mistake it appears to be. Professional. Concerned. Perfectly calculated to make Ethan look like a predator and Victoria look like a victim. Ethan drove back to the ranch with his jaw clenched and his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Victoria was in the kitchen when he got home. She looked up from her laptop, saw his face, and immediately understood. You saw the article. Half the town's seen it by now. He dropped his keys on the counter harder than necessary. Your brother works fast. He's been planning this for weeks. Probably had the statement written before we even got married. Great. So now everyone thinks I'm using you for money. Does it matter what they think? Yeah, actually it does. I live here. Emma goes to school here. These are people I've known my whole life, and now they're looking at me like I'm some kind of con artist. Victoria closed her laptop. I'm sorry. I knew Damien would go public, but I didn't think he'd move this fast. Well, he did. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Emma's going to hear about this at school. Kids talk. Parents talk. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Then we respond. How? We show them it's real. Victoria stood up. Tomorrow's the estate hearing. Damien's going to be there with lawyers and witnesses ready to tear apart our marriage as a fraud. But if we show up together, if we present a united front, if we make it clear this isn't some last-minute scam, it is a last-minute scam. It's a legal arrangement entered into by two consenting adults. Her voice sharpened. There's a difference. And if we let Damien control the narrative, he wins. Is that what you want? Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. The billionaire heiress standing in his kitchen, surrounded by ranch equipment catalogs and Emma's school art projects, fighting for something she believed in. No, he said finally. That's not what I want. Then tomorrow, we fight back. Thus, the estate hearing was held in a law office in Billings that probably charged more per hour than Ethan made in a month. Damien was already there when they arrived, sitting at a conference table with two lawyers who looked like they ate small ranchers for breakfast. He stood when Victoria entered, smiled. Victoria, good to see you. His eyes slid to Ethan. Mr. Cole, congratulations on the marriage. Damien, Victoria's voice was ice. Let's skip the pleasantries. They sat across from each other. The lawyer handling the estate, a gray-haired woman named Margaret Chen, pulled out the relevant documents and began reviewing the terms of Harold Langford's will. The conditions are straightforward, Margaret said. Control of the Langford Ranch and all associated assets transfers to Victoria Langford Cole upon proof of legal marriage before the deadline of 5 p.m. today, Friday, November 3rd. The marriage must be legally valid and entered into in good faith. And that's the problem, one of Damien's lawyers said smoothly. We have reason to believe this marriage was not entered into in good faith, but rather as a fraudulent attempt to circumvent the spirit of Mr. Langford's wishes. Margaret looked at Victoria. Do you have documentation of the marriage? Victoria slid the marriage certificate across the table. Damien's lawyer barely glanced at it. A piece of paper proves nothing. My client has evidence that Mr. Cole was specifically recruited by Miss Langford for the express purpose of satisfying the will's requirements, with no intention of maintaining an actual marital relationship. Evidence? Victoria's voice was sharp. The lawyer pulled out a folder. We have testimony from several individuals who state that Ms. Langford approached them in the weeks following her father's death, explicitly asking if they would be willing to enter into a temporary marriage arrangement. When these individuals declined, she expanded her search to include men of lesser social standing who might be more motivated by financial compensation. Ethan felt everyone's eyes on him. Mr. Cole, Margaret said carefully, is it true that you and Miss Langford discussed financial arrangements as part of this marriage? Before Ethan could answer, Victoria cut in. Yes, we discussed it. We also discussed the fact that my father's will created an impossible situation designed to force me into a marriage I didn't want. Ethan agreed to help me, yes, but that doesn't make our marriage fraudulent. It makes it practical. Practical? Damien leaned forward. Is that what we're calling it? You paid a stranger to marry you so you could steal an inheritance that should rightfully what? Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. Come to you? The son who spent the last 10 years trying to convince Dad to sell the ranch piece by piece? Who brought developers to family dinners and talked about the property like it was nothing but an investment portfolio? I wanted to modernize. You wanted to cash out. Victoria stood up, hands flat on the table. Dad knew it. That's why he put conditions on the will. He wanted to make sure whoever took over actually gave a damn about the land, not just the money it could bring. And you think marrying a broke rancher proves you give a damn? Damien's smile was cruel. Please, you've never worked a day on that ranch. You've been too busy playing businesswoman in Seattle, running Daddy's luxury brand while actual ranchers did the real work. Now you show up with a husband you bought and expect us to believe you're suddenly committed to the legacy? The room went quiet. Ethan looked at Victoria, saw the way she was holding herself together, the slight tremor in her hands pressed against the table, saw the fear underneath the anger that if Damien was right, if she couldn't prove she belonged here, everything would be lost. He thought about Emma, about the life he was trying to build for her, about the promises he'd made and the ones he'd broken, and he made a choice. "You're wrong," Ethan said. Everyone turned to look at him. "Mr. Cole?" Margaret began. "No, let me talk." Ethan kept his eyes on Damien. "You want to know why I married Victoria?" "Yeah, she offered me money. A lot of money. Money that would change my daughter's life, fix my ranch, solve every financial problem I've got. And yeah, that mattered. I'm not going to pretend it didn't." Damien's smile widened. "But here's what you don't understand," Ethan continued. "I didn't say yes because of the money. I said yes because I watched a woman show up at my door in the middle of a storm, desperate and scared and out of options, and ask for help. Not a handout, not a favor. Help. The kind of help that costs something." He looked at Victoria. "Your father's will might have been harsh, but it wasn't stupid. He wanted to know if you'd fight for what mattered, if you'd be willing to do whatever it took, even if it looked crazy from the outside. And you did. You tracked down a complete stranger and asked him to take a risk on you. That takes courage. Maybe not the kind that looks good in a boardroom, but the kind that matters when everything's on the line." Victoria's eyes were bright. "So yeah," Ethan said, "this marriage started as a deal, but that doesn't make it fake. It makes it honest. And if you can't see the difference, then you don't deserve to run anything your father built." Silence filled the conference room. Margaret Chen looked down at her papers, then back up at both of them. "The will's language specifies a marriage entered into in good faith," she said slowly. "It does not specify the motivations behind that marriage, nor does it require romantic love as a prerequisite. Based on the documentation provided and the testimony given here today, I see no legal basis to invalidate the marriage." Damien's face went dark. "This is..." "The estate transfers to Victoria Langford Cole, effective immediately." Margaret's voice was firm. "Mr. Langford, you have the right to contest this decision in court, but I'll warn you that the evidence you've presented doesn't rise to the level of fraud. At best, you're arguing that the marriage is unconventional. That's not grounds for invalidation." Victoria sat down slowly, like her legs had stopped working. Damien stood up. "This isn't over." "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "It is." He left without another word, his lawyers trailing behind him. When the door closed, Margaret looked at Victoria with something that might have been sympathy. "Congratulations, Mrs. Cole. The ranch is yours." She paused. "I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Victoria said. They didn't talk on the drive back. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, processing what had just happened, what he'd said, the way he'd defended Victoria in front of lawyers and her brother and everyone who thought this was just about money. Victoria stared out the window at the Montana landscape rolling past. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For what you said in there. You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." "Why?" Ethan thought about it. "Because it was true." More silence. Then, "I'm going to the ranch tomorrow," Victoria said. "The Langford Ranch. I need to meet with the foreman, review the books, see what kind of shape things are actually in. Damien's been managing operations for the last month, and I don't trust a single decision he made." "You know how to run a cattle operation?" "I'm about to learn." Ethan glanced at her. "You've never worked the ranch before." "No. You know your brother's right about that part, don't you? The workers aren't going to respect someone who shows up with business degrees and no dirt under her nails." "Then I'll get dirt under my nails." There was something in her voice, determination mixed with fear, that reminded Ethan of himself 3 years ago, standing at Sarah's grave, knowing he had to figure out how to be both parents to a 5-year-old while keeping a failing ranch alive. "I could help," he heard himself say. Victoria looked at him. "What?" "I've run cattle my whole life. It's not the same scale as your operation, but the principles don't change much. You need someone who knows the work, someone the hands might actually listen to." He kept his eyes on the road. "And someone who's not going to bullshit you when things are broken." "You do that?" "We're legally married. Might as well make the partnership mean something." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Okay, she said. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. I'll be there. They pulled into Ethan's driveway just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that made the old farmhouse look almost beautiful. Emma was waiting on the porch. She ran down the steps when she saw them. Did you win? She asked Victoria. Victoria smiled, the first real smile Ethan had seen from her. Yeah, kiddo, we won. Does that mean you're staying? For a while longer, yeah. Emma considered this. Okay, but you still have to help me with fractions. Deal. Inside, Ethan made dinner while Victoria and Emma worked on homework at the kitchen table. It was simple: pasta, sauce from a jar, garlic bread, but it felt like something more than just a meal. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. Later, after Emma was in bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch in the cool evening air. The storm from a week ago had cleared, leaving behind a sky full of stars that you could only see this far from the city. Your brother's going to keep coming, Ethan said. I know. He's got money and lawyers and time. I know that too. And you're still going to fight him. Victoria looked at him. What else am I supposed to do? Ethan thought about his own fights. The ones with the bank, with the weather, with his own grief. The ones you couldn't win by being smart or rich or even right. The ones you won by refusing to quit. You fight, he said. And when it gets hard, you keep fighting. And when it gets impossible, you find someone who'll fight with you. Is that what we're doing? I guess we'll find out. They sat in silence. Two people who'd started as strangers making a desperate deal and were now something else. Not quite friends. Not quite partners. Something in between that didn't have a name yet. Tomorrow would bring new problems. Damien would regroup. The ranch workers would test Victoria's authority. The town would keep talking. But tonight, sitting on a porch under Montana stars, it felt like maybe they had a chance. Victoria stood up. 6 a.m.? I'll bring coffee. Good. I'm going to need it. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with the night and the sound of wind through grass that needed cutting. He thought about the marriage certificate in the kitchen drawer, the legal document that bound him to a woman he barely knew for reasons that made sense on paper and no sense at all in reality. And he thought about what he'd said in the lawyer's office, about courage and honesty and fighting for what mattered. Maybe he'd meant it more than he realized. Inside, the house was quiet. Emma asleep upstairs. Victoria in the spare bedroom, probably working on whatever plan she had for saving her father's legacy. Ethan locked the door, turned off the lights, and headed to bed. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. But then again, most of them were. The Langford Ranch foreman's name was Walt Brennan, and he looked at Victoria like she was a tourist who'd wandered onto the wrong property. Ethan had arrived at 6 a.m. as promised, 2 travel mugs of coffee in hand, to find Victoria already standing outside the main ranch house in jeans that still had the store creases and boots so new they squeaked. She'd pulled her hair back in a ponytail and wore a canvas jacket that probably cost more than Walt's monthly salary, but at least she was trying. Walt stood on the porch of the operations building, arms crossed, flanked by 2 other ranch hands who looked equally skeptical. He was somewhere north of 60, weathered face, hands that had been working cattle since before Victoria was born. Ms. Langford, Walt said, not welcoming, just acknowledging. It's Mrs. Cole now, Victoria said. And you can call me Victoria. Uh-huh. Walt's eyes flicked to Ethan. Cole. Heard you married into money. Heard you've been running this place into the ground for Damien, Ethan said evenly. That got a reaction. Walt's jaw tightened, and one of the hands behind him shifted his weight like he was getting ready for a fight. We've been doing what we were told, Walt said. By someone who wanted to sell the place for parts, Victoria cut in. That ends now. I'm taking over operations, and I need a full accounting of where things stand. Cattle inventory, equipment status, feed supplies, maintenance schedules, everything. Walt looked at her for a long moment. You ever run cattle, Mrs. Cole? No. You know the difference between a heifer and a steer? One's female, one's castrated male. Anything else you want to quiz me on, or can we get to work? A couple of the hands exchanged glances. Walt's expression didn't change. Work starts at 5 a.m., not 6, he said. If you want to run this ranch, you show up when the work needs doing, not when it's convenient. Then I'll be here at 5 tomorrow, Victoria said. Today, I need those reports. Walt turned and walked into the building without another word. The other hands followed, leaving Victoria and Ethan standing in the early morning cold. Well, Ethan said quietly, that went great. He hates me. He doesn't know you yet. Give it time. I don't have time. Damien spent a month telling everyone I'm incompetent, and now I have to prove them all wrong before they stop listening entirely. Victoria's hands were clenched at her sides. I can't fail at this, Ethan. If I fail, Damien wins, and every acre of this land gets turned into vacation homes. Then don't fail. Helpful. I'm serious. Ethan handed her one of the coffee mugs. You're right that they don't respect you yet, but respect isn't something you can demand. You earn it by showing up and doing the work, even when it's ugly. I don't know how to do the work. So you learn. That's what I'm here for. Victoria took a long drink of coffee, staring at the mountains in the distance. My father used to bring me here when I was a kid, before he decided I was a disappointment. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful place in the world. It is, Ethan said. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Got too focused on trying to prove I could run the business side of things, the luxury brand operations, the investments. I thought that's what would make him proud. She turned to look at Ethan. He never once told me I'd done a good job. Not once. And now he's dead, and all I have is this impossible test he left behind. Ethan didn't have easy words for that. His own father had been gone for 15 years, and there were still conversations he wished he'd had, things he wished he'd said. My dad taught me everything about ranching, he said instead. How to mend fence, treat sick cattle, read weather patterns. And you know what the most important thing he taught me was? What? That the land doesn't care about your feelings. Doesn't care if you're tired or scared or don't know what you're doing. It just needs the work done, so you do it. Victoria looked at him. Is that supposed to be inspiring? It's supposed to be honest. Walt emerged from the building with a stack of ledgers and a laptop that looked like it had survived a decade of hard use. He dropped them on the hood of his truck without ceremony. There's your reports, he said to Victoria. Cattle inventory's down 20% from last year. Equipment's mostly functional, but we're overdue on maintenance for half the fleet. Feed costs are up because Damien wanted to cheap out on suppliers, so we're buying lower quality at higher prices. And morale's in the toilet because everyone knows Damien was planning to sell, and they're not sure you're any better. Victoria picked up the top ledger, flipped through it. Her expression was hard to read. How many head do we have currently? 4,000, give or take. How many should we have? 5,000 minimum to make the operation profitable at current market rates. So we're short 1,000 head. That's what 20% means. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. Where did they go? Damien sold them, said we needed to reduce overhead ahead of the transition. Walt's tone made it clear what he thought of that decision. Problem is, you can't run a cattle ranch without cattle, and buying back 1,000 head right now, with winter coming, is going to cost you twice what Damien got for selling them. Ethan could see Victoria doing the math in her head, calculating costs and timelines and all the ways this could go wrong. Then we don't buy them back right away, she said. We focus on improving the quality of what we have, getting the equipment properly maintained, and rebuilding slowly over the next year. That'll mean lower revenue in the short term, Walt said. I'm aware, but it's better than hemorrhaging money trying to fix everything at once and failing. Victoria looked at Walt directly. I'm not my brother. I'm not here to strip this place for parts. I'm here to make it work. But I can't do that alone. Walt studied her. You planning to be here every day? Every day. 5 a.m.? 5 a.m. Even when it's 10 below and the wind's trying to kill you? Even then. Something shifted in Walt's expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of possibility. All right, he said. 5 a.m. tomorrow. We'll see if you mean it. He walked away, and the other hands drifted back to their work, leaving Victoria standing in the ranch yard holding a stack of ledgers that represented every problem her father had left behind. That wasn't a complete disaster, Ethan offered. He thinks I'll quit. Probably. I won't. I know. Victoria looked at him. How do you know? Because you tracked down a stranger and asked him to marry you to stop your brother from destroying your father's legacy. That's not the behavior of someone who quits. A small smile crossed her face. Fair point. They spent the rest of the morning going through the books in the ranch office, a cramped room that smelled like old coffee and leather. Victoria took notes, asked questions, and slowly started to piece together the full picture of what Damien had done in his month of control. He was sabotaging it, she said finally, staring at a column of numbers. Selling cattle below market value, buying supplies at inflated prices, deferring maintenance that should have been done immediately. He was deliberately running it into the ground so he could justify selling it. Makes sense, Ethan said. If the ranch is failing when he takes over, nobody questions the sale. They just see it as cutting losses. Except now I have to unfail it. Victoria rubbed her eyes. With workers who don't trust me and a brother who's going to fight me every step of the way. You've also got $400 million in total assets, Ethan pointed out. That's not nothing. Most of that's tied up in land and infrastructure. The liquid capital is... She flipped through papers. Not enough. Not if I want to rebuild the herd and fix the equipment and pay competitive wages to keep good workers. So you sell something else. The luxury business, maybe. Victoria shook her head. That's based in Seattle. If I sell it, Damien can argue I'm liquidating assets improperly, and he might be able to challenge the estate distribution again. Everything has to stay intact for at least a year. They worked in silence for a while, the only sound the scratch of Victoria's pen and the occasional creak of the old building settling. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from his neighbor saying she'd picked Emma up from school and would keep her until he got home. Small-town life meant everyone knew your business, but it also meant people looked out for each other. I need to get back, he said. Emma's got... Go. Victoria didn't look up from the ledger. I'll be fine here. You sure? I've got about 6 more hours of reading to do before I understand even half of this mess. I'll call if I need anything. Ethan stood, grabbed his hat. At the door, he paused. Victoria? Yeah? Walt's testing you. Tomorrow morning, show up early. 4:30, maybe. Be there before him. It'll matter. She looked up, met his eyes. Okay. He left her there, surrounded by the evidence of her father's empire and her brother's sabotage, trying to find a way forward. The drive back to his ranch gave Ethan too much time to think. About what he'd signed up for. About the fact that this was supposed to be simple. Marry the heiress, attend the hearing, collect the money, move on. But nothing about Victoria was simple. She was stubborn and scared and determined in a way that reminded him uncomfortably of himself. Emma was doing homework at the neighbor's kitchen table when he arrived. She looked up, smiled. How was school? He asked. Fine. Except Tommy Henderson said you married a rich lady for her money and now we're going to move to a mansion. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. What did you say? I said we're not moving, and Victoria's nice even if she can't cook. Emma went back to her worksheet. Also, I might have kicked him. Just a little kick. Mrs. Patterson didn't even see it. Ethan sighed. We don't kick people for saying stuff we don't like. Even when they're being mean? Even then, we use our words. Words are boring, kicks are faster. Emma. Fine. I'll use words next time. She didn't sound convinced. They drove home as the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Emma chattered about school, about the science project she needed to start, about how her friend Maya said Victoria looked like a movie star. At home, Ethan made dinner, spaghetti again, because it was easy and Emma would actually eat it, while his daughter set the table and talked about everything and nothing. Victoria came home just after 7, looking exhausted. Her new jeans had actual dirt on them now, and her hair had come loose from its ponytail. You're alive, Ethan said. Barely. She dropped her bag by the door. I spent 3 hours with Walt going over herd rotation schedules and another 2 learning how to properly inspect fence lines. Do you know how much fence this ranch has? A lot. 73 miles. 73 miles of fence that all needs to be checked regularly, and half of it's in terrible condition. Victoria slumped into a chair. I had no idea how complicated this was. It's a big operation, Ethan said. Bigger than anything I've ever run. But the principles are the same. You learn the systems, you trust your people, and you don't try to do everything yourself. Emma appeared from the living room. Are you staying for dinner? Victoria looked surprised by the question. I don't want to intrude. You live here, Emma said matter-of-factly. That means you get dinner. Dad made spaghetti. It's not fancy, but it's good. I'd like that, Victoria said quietly. Thank you. They ate together at the small kitchen table, Emma filling the silence with stories about school, while Ethan and Victoria listened. It was strange, this domestic scene that neither of them had planned for. The billionaire heiress, the struggling rancher, and the 8-year-old who seemed to be the only one completely comfortable with the arrangement. After Emma went to bed, Ethan found Victoria on the porch again, staring out at the dark landscape. You okay? He asked. I called my mother tonight, Victoria said. Told her about the estate ruling, about taking over the ranch. You know what she said? What? She said I should sell it to Damien and take the money. That fighting him isn't worth it. That I'm making everything harder than it needs to be. Victoria's voice was flat. She never understood why I cared about this place. Neither of them did, her or my father. They saw it as an asset, not a legacy. But you see it different. I don't know what I see anymore. She turned to look at him. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was worth something to my father. Built his luxury brand into a multi-million-dollar operation, managed investments, did everything he asked, and it was never enough. Now he's gone, and I'm fighting for a ranch I barely understand because the alternative is letting Damien win. Is that crazy? Probably, Ethan said. But so is marrying a stranger to save it, and you did that too. A laugh escaped her. Fair point. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. 4:30 tomorrow? Ethan asked. 4:30, Victoria confirmed. You don't have to come with me, you know. You've got your own ranch to run. I'll be there, Ethan said, at least until you're steady on your feet. Why? It was a good question, one he didn't have a complete answer for. Because I said I'd help, he said finally, and I keep my word. Victoria looked at him in the dim porch light, something unreadable in her expression. Thank you, she said quietly. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with the night and his thoughts. The next morning, Ethan's alarm went off at 3:45 a.m. He was used to early mornings, but this was brutal even for him. He made coffee in the dark, left a note for Emma, and drove to the Langford Ranch through empty roads. Victoria's car was already there when he arrived. She was standing in the ranch yard, breath fogging in the cold air, wearing layers that made her look like she was preparing for an Arctic expedition. You're early, he said. So are you. The door to the operations building opened and Walt stepped out. He saw them, stopped, and something that might have been approval crossed his face. Well, Walt said, guess you meant it. I did, Victoria said. All right then, let's get to work. The next few weeks blurred together into a rhythm that none of them had expected, but all of them needed. Victoria showed up at 4:30 every morning, learned to check cattle, mend fence, operate equipment that looked like it should be in a museum. She made mistakes, lots of them. Drove the ATV into a ditch, mixed up medication for sick calves, nearly got trampled by a spooked heifer. But she kept showing up. The ranch hands slowly, grudgingly, started to respect that. They stopped talking over her in meetings, started asking her opinion on decisions. Walt even smiled once when she successfully fixed a broken gate latch on her third try. You're getting better, he told her one morning, and it might have been the highest praise he'd ever given anyone. Ethan watched it all happen while trying to keep his own operation running. His ranch still needed work, bills still needed paying, equipment still broke at the worst possible times. But having Victoria's money starting to come through, the first installment as promised, meant he could finally fix things instead of just patching them. Emma adjusted in the way kids do, treating Victoria like a strange aunt who'd moved in and didn't know how anything worked. She helped Victoria practice cattle terminology using stuffed animals, assigned personalities to different cows. That one's cranky. You have to talk nice to her. And appointed herself chief translator of ranch life. Dad doesn't like it when you leave coffee cups everywhere, Emma informed Victoria one morning. Noted, Victoria said, trying to hide a smile. Also, you're supposed to put your boots by the door, not in the living room. Anything else? Yeah. When he gets quiet, it means he's worried about something. You should ask him what's wrong. Victoria looked at Emma with something like surprise. That's very observant. I'm 8, not stupid. I'm starting to realize that. But the peace didn't last. Damien's first move came on a Tuesday morning in the form of a surprise inspection from the county agricultural department. They showed up with clipboards and regulations, looking for violations. Someone had filed a complaint about improper disposal of animal waste, inadequate fencing near water sources, and potential environmental hazards. Victoria knew immediately who was behind it. The inspector spent 6 hours going over every inch of the operation. In the end, they found 3 minor violations, things that would normally warrant a warning and a time frame to fix. But the complaint meant fines and a formal review process that would tie up operations for weeks. "This is harassment," Victoria told the lead inspector. "This is procedure, ma'am," he said, not unkindly. "Someone filed a complaint. We have to investigate. You fix the violations, pay the fines, and we close the case." After they left, Victoria sat in the ranch office with her head in her hands. $5,000 in fines for 3 minor violations, she said, and 2 weeks of reduced operations while we fix things that weren't even problems until Damien decided to make them problems. Ethan leaned against the desk. "He's trying to bleed you. Death by 1,000 cuts. Make it expensive and exhausting to keep fighting." "It's working." "Only if you let it." She looked up at him. "How do I fight someone who has unlimited resources and no conscience?" "You outwork him," Ethan said. "He's fighting from a distance, paying lawyers and bureaucrats to do his dirty work. You're here. You're putting in the hours, building relationships with the workers, learning the operation inside and out. That's something he can't buy." "You really believe that?" "I have to," Ethan said, "because if I don't believe hard work beats money, then what's the point of any of this?" Victoria stood up, straightened her shoulders. "All right, let's get those violations fixed." They worked late into the evening, identifying exactly what needed to be done and creating a plan to address each issue. It was tedious, frustrating work that shouldn't have been necessary, but it needed doing anyway. Ethan's phone rang just after 8 p.m. Emma. "Dad, when are you coming home?" "Soon, kiddo. I'm sorry. I got caught up. It's okay. Mrs. Patterson said I could stay for dinner, but I miss you." Guilt twisted in his chest. "I miss you too. I'll be home in 30 minutes, I promise." He hung up and found Victoria watching him. "Go," she said. "Emma needs you." "We're not done here. I can finish this. You've got a daughter who wants her father home. That's more important than fence repairs." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "You'll lock up?" "I'm not completely useless." "I didn't say that. You thought it. I thought you were stubborn and determined and maybe a little crazy, but not useless." He grabbed his jacket. "See you at home." As he drove back to his ranch, Ethan realized he'd said home, meaning the place where both he and Victoria lived now, not just his place. When had that happened? When had this temporary arrangement started feeling less temporary? Emma was waiting on the porch when he pulled up, still in her school clothes, looking small in the gathering darkness. "You're late," she said. "I know. I'm sorry. Is Victoria still working?" "Yeah." Emma frowned. "She works a lot. She's got a lot to figure out." "Are you helping her because of the money?" The question caught him off guard. "Where did that come from?" "Tommy Henderson said that's why you married her, for money. And Maya said rich people only marry other rich people, so something must be weird about it." Emma looked up at him. "Is it true?" Ethan sat down on the porch step next to his daughter. "The truth is complicated, Em. Yeah, Victoria offered me money to marry her. A lot of money. Enough to fix the ranch and make sure you can go to any college you want someday. But that's not the only reason I said yes. She needed help, and I was in a position to help her. Sometimes that's enough. Do you like her?" "I'm getting to know her." "That's not what I asked." Ethan looked at his too smart daughter. "Yeah, I like her. She's tough, and she doesn't give up even when things get hard. Those are good qualities." Emma considered this. "Okay, I like her too. She's bad at cooking, but good at math, and she doesn't treat me like a baby." High praise. "I'm serious, Dad. Most adults are boring. She's not boring." They sat together in the cold evening air, watching the sun finish setting behind the mountains. Inside, Ethan knew he should start dinner, get Emma through homework and bath and bedtime routine. But for just a moment, he let himself sit with his daughter and think about how quickly life could change when you made one desperate decision at midnight. Victoria came home just after 9. Ethan heard her car pull up, heard the front door open and close quietly. Emma was already asleep. Ethan was in the kitchen, finishing the dishes from the dinner he'd thrown together. "You're still up," Victoria said, leaning against the doorframe. "Hard to sleep when you're waiting to make sure someone got home safe." She looked surprised. "You were waiting for me? You were alone at the ranch after dark." "Of course I was waiting." Something shifted in her expression. "Thank you." "You get everything done?" "Most of it. The rest can wait until morning." She moved into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water. "Walt told me something interesting today." "Yeah?" "He said my father used to show up at 5 a.m. every single day when he was younger. Walked the property, checked every detail, knew every worker's name. Walt said Harold Langford built the ranch by outworking everyone around him." "Sounds about right." "He also said my father stopped doing that about 20 years ago. Hired managers, delegated everything, spent more time in boardrooms than on the ranch." Victoria set down her glass. "Walt said that's when things started to go wrong. Slowly at first, then faster. By the time my father died, the ranch was running on reputation and inertia, not actual good management." "So your brother didn't ruin it," Ethan said. "He just accelerated what was already happening." "Exactly." Victoria looked at him. "Which means I'm not just fighting Damien. I'm fighting decades of neglect and trying to rebuild something my father let deteriorate. Can you do it?" "I don't know, but I'm going to try." They stood in the quiet kitchen, two people bound by a legal contract that was starting to feel like something more complicated than either of them had anticipated. "Emma asked me today if I married you for the money," Ethan said. Victoria went still. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you offered me money, and I took it, but that wasn't the only reason." "What was the other reason?" Ethan thought about how to answer that, about the woman standing in the rain on his porch, desperate and out of options, about watching her show up every morning at 4:30 to learn a job she'd never done, about the determination it took to keep fighting when everyone expected you to fail. "You reminded me of myself," he said finally. "Someone trying to hold on to something important, even when the odds were terrible." I respected that. Victoria's eyes were bright in the dim kitchen light. "Past tense?" "No," Ethan said. "Present tense. I still respect it." She smiled, small, genuine. "I should get some sleep. 4:30 comes early." "It does." She turned to leave, then paused. "Ethan, thank you for helping, for being honest with Emma, for—" She gestured vaguely. "All of it. That's what partners do," he said. After she went upstairs, Ethan finished cleaning up and locked the doors. He checked on Emma, still asleep, one arm around her favorite stuffed bear, and stood in the hallway trying to figure out when this arrangement had stopped feeling temporary. The answer was probably that it had never felt temporary. Not really. From the moment Victoria showed up in the rain with her desperate proposal, something had shifted in his carefully controlled life. Now, he just had to figure out what that meant. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and carrying the smell of coming winter. Somewhere out there, Damien Langford was planning his next move. And here, in a small farmhouse that had seen better days, three people who'd been strangers weeks ago were learning to live as something resembling a family. Ethan went to bed thinking about contracts and complications, and the fact that real life rarely followed the plan you made for it. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more of Damien's attacks. But tonight, everyone under his roof was safe. For now, that was enough. Damien's next attack came on a Thursday morning disguised as opportunity. Victoria was in the equipment barn with Walt, learning the difference between a bale spear and a hay fork, when a convoy of 3 black SUVs rolled up the main drive. She knew before the doors opened that this wasn't good news. The first man out was wearing a suit that probably cost more than most of the equipment in the barn. Mid-50s, perfect hair, the kind of smile that made car salesmen look trustworthy. Behind him came 2 others, equally polished, carrying leather portfolios. "Mrs. Cole," the first man said, extending his hand. "Daniel Morrison, Morrison Development Group. We've been working with your brother on a potential acquisition." Victoria didn't shake his hand. "I'm aware of who you are, Mr. Morrison, and I'm not interested in selling." Of course. Your brother mentioned you might be hesitant." Morrison's smile never wavered. "But I was hoping we could at least have a conversation. show you what we're proposing. The opportunities here are really quite extraordinary." Walt had gone very still beside her, wrench still in hand, watching the developers with the same expression he'd used for coyotes near the herd. "There's nothing to discuss," Victoria said. "The ranch isn't for sale." "Mrs. Cole, please, just 10 minutes of your time. Let us show you the plans, the projected community impact, the financial benefits to the region." Morrison gestured toward the main house. "Surely you can spare 10 minutes." Victoria wanted to say no, wanted to tell them to get off her property and take their proposal straight to hell. But something made her pause. Maybe it was curiosity about what Damien had been planning. Maybe it was the desire to understand exactly what she was fighting against. 10 minutes, she said. Not 1 second more. They gathered in the ranch office, Morrison and his associates spreading glossy presentations across the desk like they were unveiling treasure maps. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, deliberately not sitting, while Ethan leaned against the wall behind her. He'd shown up halfway through the standoff in the equipment barn, read the situation in about 5 seconds, and positioned himself as silent backup. "What we're proposing," Morrison began, pulling out architectural renderings, "is a luxury residential development that preserves the natural beauty of the landscape while creating sustainable revenue streams for generations. 300 homes, each on 2 to 5 acres, with a central clubhouse, hiking trails, and exclusive access to—" 300 homes, Victoria interrupted, "on 30,000 acres of working ranch land. The development would only occupy about 5,000 acres, one of the associates said quickly. The rest would remain as protected open space, conservation easements. That can't support a cattle operation," Victoria finished. "You're gutting the ranch and calling it preservation." Morrison's smile tightened slightly. "Mrs. Cole, I understand this is emotional for you. Your father built something impressive here, but the economics of large-scale ranching are changing. Profit margins are thin, labor costs are rising, climate patterns are shifting. Many operations like this one are struggling to remain viable." "This operation is viable." "Is it?" Morrison pulled out a different folder. "Your brother shared some concerning financial data with us. Declining herd numbers, aging equipment, deferred maintenance costs in the millions. And that's before we factor in the reality that you're new to ranch management and facing significant challenges from—" "My brother fed you cherry-picked data designed to make the ranch look like it's failing," Victoria cut in. "He's been sabotaging operations for weeks to create exactly this narrative. With all due respect, even if we accept that premise, the underlying challenges remain." Morrison leaned forward. "We're prepared to offer $450 million for the property. That's $50 million more than the assessed estate value. You could take that money, invest it properly, and generate far more reliable returns than cattle ranching could ever provide." The number hung in the air. $450 million. Enough to never work again? To live in luxury anywhere in the world? To do anything she wanted without ever worrying about money? Victoria looked at the architectural renderings spread across her father's desk. Luxury homes where cattle should graze. Manicured lawns where native grass should grow. 300 families who'd never understand what this land meant beyond the view from their windows. "No?" she said. Morrison blinked. "Mrs. Cole, perhaps you didn't hear the figure." "I heard it. The answer is no." "I'd encourage you to take some time, think it over, discuss it with financial advisors." "I don't need time." Victoria's voice was steel. "This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather bought this land when everyone said Montana ranching was a dying industry. My father built it into something that mattered, and my brother wants to sell it for parts because he never understood what it was supposed to be. I'm not making the same mistake." "You're making an emotional decision," Morrison said, and there was an edge in his voice now. "Not a business one. I'm making the decision my father should have made years ago when people like you first started circling." Victoria gathered up the presentations and shoved them back across the desk. "The ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Tell my brother he wasted your time." Morrison stood slowly. "Your brother warned us you'd be difficult." "My brother's right about something then. Now get off my property." The developers left, their SUVs kicking up dust on the way out. Victoria stood at the window watching them go, hands trembling slightly with adrenaline. "That was satisfying," Ethan said quietly. "That was stupid." Victoria turned to face him. "I just made an enemy of a development group worth billions. They're going to align with Damien now, support whatever legal challenges he brings, fund whatever campaigns he runs to undermine me. Probably. And I did it anyway, because it was the right thing to do. Ethan moved to stand beside her at the window. You know what I noticed about those renderings? What? Not a single one showed cattle, or working barns, or any of the infrastructure that makes this place function. They want to erase what this is and replace it with something sanitized and profitable. He looked at her. You didn't let them. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. My father would have hated those plans. Then you honored his memory by refusing $450 million. Money's not the only thing worth having. Walt appeared in the doorway. Those developers are gone? They're gone, Victoria confirmed. Good. We've got a problem with the north fence line. Storm last night took down about 30 feet of wire, and we've got cattle getting ideas about the neighbor's grass. Victoria grabbed her work gloves. Show me. They spent the rest of the day repairing fence in the November cold, Victoria learning how to properly tension wire and secure posts while Walt provided running commentary on everything she was doing wrong. By the time they finished, her hands were raw despite the gloves, her shoulders ached, and she'd learned approximately 15 new ways to curse when a fence post refused to cooperate. But the fence was fixed. Ethan had left hours earlier to pick up Emma from school, and by the time Victoria got back to his farmhouse, it was nearly dark. She could hear laughter inside, Emma's high voice and Ethan's lower rumble, and for a moment she just stood on the porch, listening to a family dynamic she'd never quite had. Emma looked up when Victoria came in. You're dirty. I was fixing fence. Did you do it right? According to Walt, no, but it's fixed anyway. That counts. Emma went back to her drawing. Dad made chicken. There's some left if you want it. Victoria found Ethan in the kitchen, putting away dishes. He glanced at her, did a double take. You've got mud on your face, he said. I've got mud everywhere. How'd the fence repair go? Walt says I'm terrible at it, but he let me finish the job instead of taking over, so I'm calling it progress. Victoria leaned against the counter. Damien called me 17 times this afternoon. You answer? Once. He screamed at me for embarrassing him in front of Morrison's group, said I was being childish and vindictive and destroying opportunities for the whole community. She rubbed her eyes. Then he threatened to file a lawsuit claiming I'm mismanaging the estate. Ethan set down the dish he was drying. Can he do that? He can file whatever he wants. Whether it goes anywhere is another question. Victoria's voice was tired. But it'll cost money to defend, tie up my time in depositions and court appearances, and create more negative publicity. Which is the point. He's not going to stop. I know. They stood in the small kitchen, the weight of Damien's campaign settling over both of them like the November cold seeping through the walls. I'm making your life complicated, Victoria said quietly. You made my life solvent, Ethan countered. The complications come with the territory. Still, Emma's hearing things at school, you're spending time helping me instead of focusing on your own ranch, and now we're looking at potential lawsuits. That's not what you signed up for. I signed up to help you save your father's ranch from your brother. Everything else is just details. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd agreed to marry a stranger because she'd shown up desperate on his doorstep. Who showed up every morning to teach her things he'd learned over a lifetime. Who defended her to lawyers and developers and his own daughter when it would have been easier to stay neutral. Why are you really doing this? She asked. Ethan thought about it. Because someone helped me once. After Sarah died, I was drowning. Had a newborn daughter, a ranch to run. Grief I didn't know how to process. My neighbors could have left me to figure it out alone. Instead, they showed up. Brought food, helped with chores, took care of Emma when I couldn't function. They kept me afloat until I could breathe again. And you're paying it forward. Something like that. That's a better reason than $5 million. I don't know. $5 million is pretty compelling. He smiled slightly. But yeah, it's nice to be the person who shows up for someone else for once. Emma appeared in the doorway. Are you guys done being serious? I need help with my book report. What's it on? Victoria asked. Charlotte's Web. I have to write about friendship and sacrifice and stuff. Emma made a face. It's sad. The spider dies at the end. Most good stories are a little sad, Victoria said. That's what makes them matter. Did you read it when you were a kid? I did. Did you cry? Absolutely. Emma considered this. Okay, you can help me with the report then. Dad cries at commercials, so he's not a good judge of sad things. Hey, Ethan protested. That commercial with the dog was legitimately emotional. It was a commercial for paper towels, Dad. The dog was very expressive. Victoria laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. Emma grinned, pleased with herself, and dragged Victoria to the kitchen table to discuss the finer points of spider friendship and pig salvation. Ethan watched them work together, his daughter explaining her interpretation, while Victoria asked questions that made Emma think deeper. This wasn't what he'd imagined when he'd signed that contract, but watching them now, he couldn't quite remember what he'd expected instead. The storm hit 3 days later with the kind of violence that made Montana winters legendary. Ethan woke to his phone ringing at 2 a.m. Walt's number. We've got a problem, Walt said without preamble. Northgate's down. Wind took out the entire section, and we've got cattle scattered across 2 properties. Need every hand we can get. Ethan was already pulling on clothes. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He knocked on Victoria's door. She answered immediately, already awake, probably from the same call. How bad? She asked. Bad enough that Walt's calling in everyone. Get dressed. We're going to be out there for hours. They left Emma with the neighbor. Thank heaven for Mrs. Patterson and her willingness to take in a sleeping child at 2 a.m, and drove through driving rain to the Langford Ranch. The storm had turned the roads into rivers, and Ethan's truck struggled through water that shouldn't have been there. The ranch yard was chaos. Lights everywhere, engines running, ranch hands yelling instructions over the howl of wind. Walt appeared out of the darkness, rain streaming off his hat. We've got about 200 head loose, he shouted. Maybe more. They scattered when the gate went down, and they're spooked from the storm. We need to round them up before they get too far or hurt themselves. What do you need us to do? Victoria asked. Walt looked at her for a long moment, rain plastering her hair to her face, expensive jacket already soaked through. You ever herded cattle in a storm? No. Then stay close to Cole and do what he says. This isn't the time to learn by trial and error. They spent the next hour in the freezing rain, chasing terrified cattle across muddy fields. The animals were panicked, running in every direction, and getting them grouped together was like trying to organize water. Ethan rode his horse, one of the ranch's working quarter horses, while Victoria followed in an ATV, learning in real time how to position herself to turn cattle without spooking them further. She was terrible at it. Cattle scattered when she got too close. The ATV slid in the mud, nearly tipping twice. Rain made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead, and the cold was the kind that went straight through clothing and settled in your bones. But she didn't quit. Ethan watched her through the storm. This woman who'd probably never been this cold or wet or miserable in her entire life, and she just kept going. Kept trying to turn cattle even when they bolted. Kept repositioning the ATV even when it slid. Kept moving even when she had to be exhausted. Around 4 a.m., they finally got the bulk of the herd contained in a temporary pen. Walt did a count. 173 head recovered. That meant about 30 still missing, but those would have to wait for daylight. The ranch hands gathered in the equipment barn, dripping water and stamping feeling back into frozen feet. Someone had brought coffee in huge thermoses, and Victoria accepted a cup with shaking hands. You did good, one of the younger hands told her, for your first storm roundup. I did terrible, Victoria said honestly, but I tried. That's what matters out here. He tipped his hat and moved off. Walt appeared at her elbow. You look like hell. I feel like hell. Good. Means you worked. He took a long drink of coffee. We'll go out again at first light, find the rest of the strays, get some rest while you can. Victoria nodded, too tired to speak. Ethan drove her back to his place through roads that were marginally less flooded now that the rain was letting up. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, promising a sunrise neither of them had the energy to appreciate. Thank you, Victoria said quietly. For what? For not making me stay home. For letting me be part of that even though I was useless. You weren't useless. You were inexperienced. There's a difference. Ethan glanced at her. And you didn't quit. That counts for a lot. They pulled into his driveway just as Emma was waking up. Mrs. Patterson had already left for her own home, leaving a note about breakfast in the oven. Emma took one look at them and her eyes went wide. "You're all muddy." "We were chasing cattle in a storm," Victoria said. "Did you catch them?" "Most of them." "Cool." Emma went back to pouring cereal. "Can I help next time?" "Absolutely not," Ethan said. "You're 8, Victoria added. "You need to be at least 12 before you can help with storm roundups." Emma considered this. "That's 4 years. Good math. I'm good at math. You taught me fractions, remember?" Despite being exhausted, cold, and covered in mud, Victoria smiled. "I remember." Ethan sent Emma off to get ready for school, while he and Victoria stood in the kitchen trying to decide if they had enough energy to shower before collapsing. "I need to be back at the ranch by 7, Victoria said. "It's 5:30 now." "I know." "You've been up since 2. "I know that too." Ethan shook his head. "You're going to kill yourself trying to prove something." "I'm trying to save something," Victoria corrected. "There's a difference." She went upstairs to shower, and Ethan did the same. By the time they both emerged, Emma was ready for school, and the clock was pushing 6:30. "You're going back out there?" Emma asked Victoria. "We still have cattle missing." "But you're tired." "I am," Victoria admitted. "But the cattle don't care if I'm tired. They need to be found." Emma looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "Okay, but you should eat something first. Dad says you can't work on empty." Victoria accepted a piece of toast, ate it standing up, and was out the door by 6:45. Ethan dropped Emma at school and headed to his own ranch to check on things there. His operation was smaller, easier to manage, but it still needed attention. He spent 2 hours fixing storm damage, a blown-off roof panel, a flooded equipment shed, a water trough that had overflowed and needed draining. His phone rang around 9. "Victoria." "We found the rest of the cattle," she said. She sounded exhausted. "All accounted for. A few injuries, nothing major." "That's good news." "Yeah." A pause. "Ethan, the hands are talking. About last night. About me being out there in the storm." "What are they saying?" "That I'm either crazy or actually serious about this." Walt said, her voice caught slightly. "He said my father would have been proud." Ethan sat down on the bumper of his truck. "He's right. I don't know. My father was never proud of anything I did when he was alive. Why would that change now?" "Because now you're doing the thing he actually valued. Not business deals or luxury brands. You're working the land, fighting for the ranch, refusing to quit when it gets hard. That's what mattered to him." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I'm covered in mud, my hands are bleeding from barbed wire, and I'm so tired I can barely see straight. This is what he valued? This is what ranching is." "It's terrible." "It is," Ethan agreed. "But you're still doing it." "Because I'm stubborn." "That's as good a reason as any." She laughed, tired but genuine. "I need to go. There's a broken fence section that needs proper repair before tonight." "Victoria?" "Yeah?" "You did good last night, for what it's worth." "Thanks, Ethan." She hung up, and Ethan sat there in the November sunshine, thinking about billionaire heiresses who chased cattle through storms and refused to break even when breaking would have been easier. The rest of the week settled into a new normal that was somehow both exhausting and routine. Victoria showed up at the ranch every morning, worked until dark, came home too tired to do much beyond eat and sleep. Emma helped with homework at the kitchen table. Ethan managed his own operation while keeping an eye on Victoria's progress. Then, on Saturday morning, Damien made his move. Victoria was in town getting supplies when she saw them. News vans. 3 of them parked outside the ranch gates, cameras set up, reporters doing stand-ups. She pulled over and called Ethan. "There are news crews at the ranch. I see them. They're at my place too." "What?" "2 vans just pulled up my drive. They're asking for comments about our marriage." Victoria felt ice settle in her stomach. Damien leaked something. "Had to. This is coordinated. I'm coming to your place." "Victoria, I'm not letting them ambush you alone." She drove to Ethan's ranch and found him standing in his yard, arms crossed, facing down 2 reporters and their camera crews. "Mr. Cole," one of them was saying, "sources close to the Langford family have provided documents suggesting your marriage to Victoria Langford was explicitly arranged for financial benefit. Can you confirm that you're receiving $5 million in exchange for— Get off my property, Ethan said flatly. The public has a right to know. The public has a right to nothing about my private life. You're trespassing. Victoria pulled up and got out of her truck. The cameras immediately swiveled to her. Mrs. Cole, can you comment on allegations that your marriage is fraudulent? Did you pay your husband to marry you? Is it true you're violating the spirit of your father's will? Victoria walked past them to stand beside Ethan. No comment. But the documents— I don't care about your documents, Victoria said. This interview is over. Your brother says— My brother is attempting to undermine my legal ownership of family property because he wanted to sell it for parts. Whatever he's told you is designed to serve that goal, not inform the public. The reporter pressed forward. But if the marriage was arranged purely for inheritance purposes, our marriage is legal and valid, Ethan cut in. Everything else is speculation and family drama that's none of your business. Now get off my land before I call the sheriff. The reporters looked at each other, clearly hoping for more conflict. When none came, they slowly packed up their equipment and left. Victoria and Ethan stood in the yard, watching them drive away. They're going to run the story anyway, Victoria said quietly. I know. Everyone's going to know about the money, about the arrangement. Probably. Emma's going to see it. Her friends will see it. The whole town will be talking. Ethan looked at her. You want to back out? What? The deal. You want to end it? I'd understand if you did. This is getting ugly in ways neither of us expected. Victoria thought about it. About the easy path. Dissolve the marriage, let Damien have the ranch, take whatever settlement he'd offer to avoid a prolonged legal fight. Walk away from the mud and the storms and the news cameras and all of it. She thought about her father's ranch being carved up into luxury homes, about Walt and the other hands losing their jobs, about 3 generations of legacy being erased for profit margins. No, she said, I'm not backing out. You're sure? I'm sure. Ethan nodded slowly. All right then, we fight. The story broke that evening, running on local news and spreading online. The headline was predictable. Billionaire heiress buys husband to secure inheritance. The details were worse. Leaked financial documents showing the payment structure, anonymous quotes from family friends questioning Victoria's judgment, speculation about what this meant for the Langford legacy. Emma saw it because of course she did. Kids at school talked. By Monday morning, she was facing questions from classmates that no 8-year-old should have to field. Is it true your dad married Victoria for money? One kid asked at recess. That's none of your business, Emma said. My mom says it's like prostitution but legal. Emma didn't fully understand what that meant, but she knew it wasn't nice. Your mom should mind her own business. Emma Cole, you can't talk about my mom like that. Then your mom shouldn't talk about my dad. It escalated from there. By the time Ethan got the call from the principal's office, Emma had pushed the other girl and was sitting in the hallway with her arms crossed, looking mutinous. She started it, Emma said when he arrived. I don't care who started it, Ethan said quietly. We don't push people. She said mean things about you and Victoria. And you think pushing her fixed that? Emma looked down. No. The principal, Mrs. Chen, who'd been running the school for 20 years, gave Emma a warning and sent her back to class. When she was gone, she turned to Ethan. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I know your family. I know you're a good father doing your best. Whatever's going on with your marriage is your business, not the rumor mill's. Thanks, Ethan said, but I don't think Emma's going to have an easy time the next few weeks. Kids are resilient. She'll get through it. Ethan drove Emma home in silence. When they pulled into the driveway, Victoria's car was already there. She was on the porch, and one look at her face told him she'd heard. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I'm so sorry. Emma shouldn't be dealing with this because of my family's mess. It's not your fault, Ethan said. It is, though. If I hadn't shown up here, if I hadn't asked you to— Stop. Ethan's voice was firm. We made a deal. Both of us. We knew it might get complicated. Emma's tough. She'll handle it. Emma had gone inside to her room. Victoria looked like she wanted to say more but didn't know what. The town council called an emergency meeting, she said instead, tomorrow night, to discuss concerns about the Langford Ranch management and its impact on community integrity. Damien's been talking to people, getting them worried about property values and local reputation. He's trying to turn everyone against you. It's working. They stood there as the afternoon light faded, two people watching their carefully arranged deal turn into something messier and more public than either had anticipated. "I should go check on Emma," Ethan said. He found his daughter lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling. "I'm sorry I pushed Hannah," she said without looking at him. "I know. But I'm not sorry for being mad. I know that too." Emma rolled over to face him. "Is the marriage really fake?" Ethan sat down on the edge of her bed. "It's legally real. Victoria and I are actually married, but we got married for practical reasons, not romantic ones." "So you don't love her?" Ethan stopped. Thought about Victoria covered in mud at 2 a.m., chasing cattle. About her standing up to developers and reporters and her own brother. About the way she helped Emma with math homework and didn't complain when the hot water ran out. "I care about her. I respect her. I want to help her succeed. Love is more complicated." "Adults make everything complicated," Emma said. "We really do." "Do you wish you didn't marry her?" "No," Ethan said, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. "I don't wish that." "Okay." Emma sat up. "Then I don't either, even if Hannah's mom is mean about it." Ethan pulled his daughter into a hug, holding on maybe a little longer than necessary. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ethan found Victoria on the porch again. She was wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the dark landscape. "Emma okay?" she asked. "She will be." He sat down beside her. "What about you?" "I've been better." Victoria pulled the blanket tighter. "The town council meeting tomorrow is going to be brutal. Damien's been feeding them horror stories about my mismanagement, about how I'm running the ranch into the ground and destroying property values by association. None of that's true. Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if people believe it." They sat in silence for a moment. "I keep thinking about what my father wanted," Victoria said quietly. "He created this impossible test. Marry before the deadline or lose everything. And I passed it. Barely. But now I'm realizing the test wasn't just getting married. It was proving I could handle everything that came after. The attacks, the criticism, the pressure. He wanted to know if I'd fold or fight. And I'm still here." Ethan looked at her. "That's your answer then." Victoria met his eyes. In the dim porch light, she looked exhausted and determined and more real than the polished billionaire who'd shown up in the rain weeks ago. "Yeah," she said, "I guess it is." Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, another storm coming. There were always more storms, but for now they sat together on the porch, two people bound by a contract that had become something more complicated than paper and signatures, and neither of them was ready to quit yet. The town council meeting was held in the same community center where Ethan had attended school fundraisers and holiday potlucks for the past decade. Walking in with Victoria felt like entering hostile territory. The room was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. Ethan recognized most of them: neighbors, shop owners, parents from Emma's school, people who'd known him his entire life, now looking at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disapproval. Damien was already there, sitting in the front row wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people in the room made in a month. He smiled when he saw Victoria, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sister," he said, "glad you could make it." "Damien." Victoria's voice was flat. The council president, a man named Tom Hendricks, who owned the feed store, called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to discuss concerns that have been raised about the Langford Ranch operations and their impact on our community. Mr. Langford has requested time to address the council." Damien stood, buttoning his jacket. He looked like he was about to give a corporate presentation, not address his neighbors. "Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you all taking time tonight." He turned to face the room. "I want to start by saying I love my sister. This isn't personal. But I have serious concerns about the decisions she's making and how they affect all of us." Victoria's jaw tightened. "My father built the Langford Ranch over 40 years, Damien continued. He employed local workers, supported local businesses, and was a pillar of this community. When he died, he left the ranch to Victoria under certain conditions. She met those conditions by entering into what can only be described as a business arrangement with Mr. Cole here." All eyes turned to Ethan. He kept his expression neutral. "I'm not here to judge that decision," Damien said. though his tone suggested otherwise. What concerns me is what's happened since. Victoria has no ranching experience. She's made questionable financial decisions, deferred critical maintenance, and created uncertainty about the ranch's future. Local suppliers have complained about late payments. Workers have expressed concerns about job security. Walt stood up from the back of the room. That's a lie. Tom looked startled. Walt, you'll have a chance to... No, I'll talk now. Walt moved to the aisle. I've worked the Langford Ranch for 32 years. Harold Langford hired me straight out of high school, and I've been there through good times and bad. You want to know what happened when Damien was running things? He sold off cattle at fire sale prices, bought cheap feed that made the herd sick, ignored equipment failures that could have killed someone. He was deliberately sabotaging the operation so he could justify selling it to developers. Murmurs rippled through the room. Since Victoria took over, Walt continued, she's shown up every single day at 5 a.m. She's learned the work from scratch. She fixed the mess Damien made. And yeah, she's inexperienced, but she's willing to learn. That's more than I can say for her brother. Damien's smile had frozen. Walt, I understand you're loyal to my sister. I'm loyal to the ranch, Walt cut in. Something you never were. Tom banged his gavel. Let's keep this civil. Mr. Langford, do you have specific concerns to present? Damien pulled out a folder. I have documentation showing that Victoria has been using ranch resources to support Mr. Cole's failing operation, lending equipment, sharing labor, essentially subsidizing his business with Langford assets. That's a conflict of interest and potential misuse of estate property. Victoria stood up. That's not true. Mrs. Cole, you'll have your turn. No, I'll address this now. Victoria's voice cut through the room. Ethan has helped me learn ranch operations. In exchange, I've occasionally borrowed his expertise for specific projects. Any equipment sharing has been documented and reciprocal. And calling his operation failing is rich coming from someone who tried to bankrupt a multi-million-dollar ranch in 1 month. You paid him $5 million to marry you, Damien shot back. That's not reciprocal. That's buying someone to legitimize a sham marriage. The room went completely silent. Ethan felt every eye on him, felt the weight of judgment from people he'd known his entire life. He could stay quiet, let Victoria handle this. Or he could do what he'd been avoiding since this whole thing started, tell the truth in front of everyone. He stood up. Yeah, Ethan said. She offered me $5 million. I took it. The murmurs got louder. Tom banged the gavel again. You want to know why? Ethan continued. Because I was 6 months from losing my ranch. Because I've got a daughter who deserves better than watching her father fail. Because when someone offers you a way out of drowning, you take it. That make me a bad person? Maybe. But it doesn't make our marriage fake. It makes it transactional, Damien said. Everything's transactional if you look at it that way. You work, they pay you. You buy something, you exchange money for goods. Victoria needed a husband to satisfy her father's will. I needed money to save my ranch. We made a deal that benefited both of us. That's not fraud. That's two people solving their problems. A woman in the third row, Mrs. Henderson, who Ethan had helped when she broke her leg, stood up. Tom, I don't see what business this is of ours. Ethan and Victoria are adults. How they arrange their marriage isn't the council's concern. It is when it affects community reputation, someone else called out. We've got news crews showing up, asking questions, making us all look bad. The news crews showed up because Damien called them, Victoria said sharply. He's the one who leaked private documents and made this public. If you're worried about reputation, you're looking at the wrong sibling. Damien's expression hardened. I'm trying to protect this community from your incompetence. You're playing rancher while the operation deteriorates. My father's legacy deserves better. Your father's legacy deserves someone who actually cares about the land, Victoria shot back. You want to turn 30,000 acres into vacation homes for tech millionaires? Don't pretend this is about protecting anything except your bank account. I want to maximize the property's value for everyone's benefit by destroying it. Tom banged the gavel hard. Enough. This is getting out of hand. The council's role here is to determine if there are legitimate concerns about ranch operations affecting the community, not to mediate family disputes. A council member Ethan didn't know well, a woman named Sarah Perkins, raised her hand. I have a question for Mrs. Cole. You've been running the ranch for, 6 weeks now? 7 weeks, Victoria said. What's your plan? Long term. Because right now it looks like you're fighting your brother more than you're actually managing the operation. It was a fair question. Victoria took a breath. My plan is to rebuild what my father let deteriorate over the last 20 years. Increase the herd back to sustainable numbers. Modernize equipment while maintaining the operation's core identity as a working cattle ranch. Invest in the workers who've kept this place running despite my father's neglect and my brother's sabotage. She paused. And yes, I'm fighting my brother because he's trying to undermine me at every turn. But that doesn't mean I'm not focused on the work. How are you financing all this? Sarah asked. Estate assets, carefully managed. I'm not taking on debt. I'm not selling property. I'm using existing resources to fund incremental improvements. And Mr. Cole's involvement? Ethan stood again. I help when she asks. Mostly that means teaching her things I learned from my father. Equipment maintenance, herd management, the kind of practical knowledge you don't get from business school. In return, she's helped me modernize some of my own operations. It's a partnership. A partnership you're being paid $5 million for, Damien said. Damien. Yeah, I am. Ethan looked directly at Damien. You know what the difference is between me and you? I'm actually working for that money. You just wanted to inherit it and cash out. Damien stood up, his composure finally cracking. You're a broke single father who got lucky. You saw an opportunity to climb the ladder by marrying up, and you took it. Don't act like you're some noble partner helping my sister. You're using her for money, and everyone in this room knows it. Damien, that's enough, Victoria started. No, let him talk, Ethan said quietly, because here's what I know. Yeah, I needed the money. But your sister? She needed someone who wouldn't sell her out the second things got hard. Someone who'd show up at 2 a.m. in a storm to chase cattle through the mud. Someone who'd stand next to her when reporters and town councils and her own family are questioning every decision she makes. He turned to face the room. I've lived in this town my whole life. Most of you have known me since I was a kid. You know I work hard. You know I take care of my daughter. You know I don't lie or cheat or take shortcuts. So yeah, I married Victoria for money. But I also married her because she reminded me of myself, someone trying to hold on to something important when everyone else said to let it go. If that makes me opportunistic, fine, but it also makes me human. The room was quiet. Victoria stood beside him. My father created an impossible situation because he wanted to test me. He wanted to know if I'd do whatever it took to save the ranch. And I did. I found someone willing to help, and I made a deal that benefited both of us. If that's not how you think marriages should work, I understand. But it's legal, it's honest, and it's nobody's business but ours. Sarah Perkins looked at Tom. I move that we table this discussion. I don't see any evidence of wrongdoing that requires council intervention. This is a family matter being aired publicly, and we shouldn't be part of it. Another council member seconded the motion. Tom looked around the room, clearly aware that the meeting had spiraled beyond what he'd planned. All in favor? Most of the hands went up. Motion carries. This matter is tabled. Tom banged the gavel. Meeting adjourned. People started filing out, some casting curious glances at Ethan and Victoria, others deliberately avoiding eye contact. Damien stood in the front row, his expression dark. He walked over to where they stood. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Victoria said. You tried to turn the community against me. It didn't work. You've got no more moves, Damien. I've got lawyers. I've got evidence of mismanagement. You've got nothing, Ethan cut in. Your sister owns the ranch. She's running it properly. Everything else is just you being angry that you lost. Damien looked at Ethan with pure contempt. You really think you're part of this family now? You think 1 year of pretending is going to change anything? The second that contract is up, she'll divorce you and you'll go back to being nobody. Maybe, Ethan said. Or maybe I'm okay with being nobody. At least I can sleep at night. Damien turned and walked out without another word. Walt approached, hat in his hands. That took guts, what you both said in there. Or stupidity, Victoria said. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Either way, the hands will respect it, standing up like that. Walt nodded to Ethan. Both of you. After he left, Ethan and Victoria stood in the emptying community center, processing what had just happened. I'm sorry, Victoria said quietly. For what? For dragging you into this. For making you defend yourself in front of everyone you know. She gestured helplessly. All of it. Stop apologizing, Ethan said. I made my choice. I knew what I was signing up for. Did you? Because I don't think either of us expected it to get this public or this ugly. No, Ethan admitted. But it is what it is, and we're still here. They drove back separately, Ethan picking up Emma from Mrs. Patterson's on the way. His daughter was quiet in the truck. Did people say mean things at the meeting? She asked. Some people did. Did you say mean things back? I said honest things. Sometimes those sound mean. Emma thought about this. Hannah's mom called me at Mrs. Patterson's house. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did she say? She said her daughter told her what happened at school, about the pushing, and she wanted to say she was sorry for what Hannah said about you and Victoria. Emma looked out the window. She said adults sometimes say things without thinking about who gets hurt. That's true. She said Hannah's grounded for a week for being mean. Well, you're grounded too for pushing her. I know. A pause. But at least we're both grounded, so it's fair. Ethan smiled despite himself. That's one way to look at it. At home, Victoria was already on the porch, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up when they arrived, held up one finger. I understand, she was saying. Yes. I'll have my lawyer review and get back to you by Friday. She hung up and rubbed her eyes. What now? Ethan asked. Damien's filing a formal petition to review the estate distribution. Claims I've violated the terms by mismanaging assets and entering into improper financial arrangements. She laughed without humor. He's really committed to this. Can he win? I don't know. My lawyer says it's a long shot, but it'll be expensive to defend and tie up my ability to make major operational decisions while it's pending. Emma had gone inside. Ethan sat down on the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't knocked on my door that night, he said. Victoria sat beside him. You'd be 6 months closer to losing your ranch. I'd have lost mine to Damien. We'd both be worse off. Maybe. Or maybe we'd have found different solutions, easier ones. You don't really believe that. Ethan thought about it. No, I don't. They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the house, Emma was probably doing homework or playing with her toys, blissfully unaware of the legal battles and financial maneuvering happening around her. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Yeah. What you said tonight, about me reminding you of yourself. Did you mean that? Ethan looked at her. Yeah, I meant it. Why? Because when Sarah died, I had a choice. I could sell the ranch, take whatever money I could get, move somewhere easier with Emma. Or I could fight to keep the one thing I had left that connected me to my family, to my father, to the life I'd built. Everyone told me selling was the smart move, the practical move. But you didn't. I couldn't. Even when it meant being broke and exhausted and scared all the time. Even when it would have been easier to let go. He looked at her. That's what I saw in you that first night. Someone who couldn't let go, even when letting go was easier. Victoria's eyes were bright. I'm glad you didn't sell. Me too. She stood up. I should go inside. I've got about 6 hours of legal documents to review before tomorrow. Victoria? She turned. We're going to win this, Ethan said. Damien's running out of options. He's desperate. People notice that. I hope you're right. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with the approaching night. He thought about the meeting, about standing in front of his community and admitting he'd married for money, about the looks on their faces, some judgmental, some understanding, most just confused about how their quiet neighbor had ended up in the middle of a billionaire family war. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Margaret Chen from the estate hearing. I shouldn't be contacting you, but I wanted you to know Damien's petition is weak. Unless he finds actual evidence of fraud or mismanagement, it won't go anywhere. Your wife is doing better than he wants anyone to believe. Ethan stared at the message, then typed back a simple thank you. Inside, he found Emma at the kitchen table with Victoria, working on a science project about the water cycle. And then it evaporates, Emma was explaining, pointing at her diagram. Goes up into the sky and becomes clouds. What makes it evaporate? Victoria asked. The sun, heat energy. Good. What happens next? It rains, and then it starts over again. Victoria smiled. Exactly. It's a cycle that keeps repeating. Emma looked up at her father. Did you know Victoria's really good at science? I did not know that. She helped me understand condensation. Mrs. Martinez tried to explain it, but it didn't make sense until Victoria used an example about her car windows fogging up. Practical applications, Victoria said. That's the key to science. Ethan watched them work together, his daughter and the woman he'd married for money 6 weeks ago, and felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerous and complicated and maybe inevitable. He made dinner while they finished the project. Spaghetti again, because it was easy and he was too tired for creativity. They ate together at the small table, Emma dominating the conversation with stories about her day and questions about whether clouds could fall out of the sky if they got too heavy. After Emma went to bed, Ethan and Victoria cleaned up the kitchen in comfortable silence. She's a good kid, Victoria said. She is. Smart, too. That water cycle explanation was better than some I've heard from adults. She gets that from her mother. Sarah was the smart one. I just worked hard. Victoria dried a plate, set it in the cabinet. I think you're smarter than you give yourself credit for. Why's that? Because you recognized that taking my offer was the right move, even when it looked crazy from the outside. That takes intelligence, not just desperation. Ethan looked at her. You trying to make me feel better about selling out? I'm trying to point out that you didn't sell out. You made a strategic decision that benefited both of us. There's a difference. Damien doesn't think so. Damien's an idiot. That surprised a laugh out of Ethan. Thought he was your brother. He is. Doesn't mean he's not an idiot. Victoria hung up the dish towel. When this is all over, when the year's up and we get divorced, I want you to know something. What? You saved me. Not just the ranch. Me. I was drowning in my father's expectations and my brother's sabotage, and you threw me a lifeline. I won't forget that. Ethan felt something tighten in his throat. You're already talking about the divorce? That was the deal, wasn't it? 1 year, then we go our separate ways. Yeah, that was the deal. They stood in the kitchen, the weight of that future separation settling between them like unwanted cargo. I should get some sleep, Victoria said finally. Early morning tomorrow. Always is. She headed upstairs and Ethan finished putting away the last of the dishes. He thought about 1 year from now, when Victoria would move out and go back to her life. When Emma would have to adjust again to it being just the two of them. When this house would feel too quiet after months of having someone else in it. The thought hurt more than it should have. The next few weeks were a strange mixture of routine and chaos. Victoria continued showing up at the ranch every morning, working alongside Walt and the hands. The herd was slowly being rebuilt, equipment was getting properly maintained, and the operation was starting to look like what it should have been all along. Damien's legal petition moved forward but slowly. Depositions were scheduled, documents were exchanged, lawyers argued over jurisdictional minutiae. It was expensive and exhausting, but it wasn't the immediate threat Damien had hoped it would be. The town gossip continued, but with less intensity. People had other things to talk about. The upcoming winter, the high school football team's playoff run, the hardware store's closing sale. Ethan and Victoria's marriage became background noise instead of headline news. Emma adjusted in the way kids do, making peace with Hannah at school and moving on to new dramas involving who got to be line leader and whether chocolate milk was better than regular milk. And somewhere in all of that, something shifted between Ethan and Victoria. It was small things at first, the way she'd save him the last cup of coffee in the morning, the way he'd text her when Emma said something funny, the comfortable silences that replaced the awkward ones. Victoria started joining them for dinner every night instead of eating alone in her room. Started helping Emma with bedtime routine when Ethan was running late with chores. Started keeping a pair of work boots by the door and a coffee mug in the cabinet like she belonged there. One night in early December, after Emma was asleep, Ethan found Victoria on the porch wrapped in a blanket against the cold. You're going to freeze out here, he said. I like the cold. Clears my head. He sat beside her anyway. What's on your mind? The deposition is tomorrow. Damien's lawyer is going to ask me about every decision I've made since taking over the ranch. Try to make me look incompetent. You're not incompetent. I'm inexperienced. There's a difference, but Damien's going to try to blur the line. So be honest. Tell them you're learning. Show them the progress you've made. Victoria looked at him. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. She smiled. When did you get wise? I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention. They sat together, shoulders almost touching, watching their breath fog in the cold air. Ethan? Victoria's voice was quiet. Yeah? Thank you for everything. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. You don't have to keep thanking me. I do, though, because you didn't have to do any of this. You could have taken the money and done the bare minimum, showed up for the hearing and nothing else. But you've been there every step of the way. Ethan thought about how to respond to that, about the fact that somewhere along the way, helping Victoria had stopped feeling like an obligation and started feeling like something he wanted to do. Maybe I'm invested now, he said. In the ranch? In you. The words hung between them, heavier than either of them expected. Victoria looked at him, and in the dim porch light he could see something complicated crossing her face. Ethan, I know, he said quickly. I know what the deal is. 1 year, then done. I'm not trying to change that. I'm just saying... He stopped, not sure what he was saying. I'm invested too, Victoria said quietly. In you. In Emma. In this weird life we've built together. But the deal is the deal. 1 year. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. But that doesn't mean it's easy. They sat in silence, both of them aware that something had shifted, but neither knowing what to do about it. I should go in, Victoria said finally. Early morning. Always is. She stood, then paused. Ethan? I'm glad it was you. That night. I'm glad you were the one who answered the door. Me too. She went inside, leaving Ethan alone with the cold and the stars and the realization that he'd fallen for the woman he'd married for money, which was exactly what he'd promised himself he wouldn't do. The deposition the next day was brutal, just like Victoria predicted. Damien's lawyer spent 4 hours asking pointed questions about every decision she'd made, every dollar she'd spent, every interaction with Ethan. But Victoria held her ground. She admitted inexperience but demonstrated progress, showed documentation of improved operations, positive feedback from workers, financial records proving sustainable management. By the time it was over, even Damien's lawyer looked frustrated. How'd it go? Ethan asked when she called afterward. I didn't break. That's something. That's everything. When she came home that night, Emma had made her a welcome back sign decorated with drawings of cows and rainbows. Victoria stood in the doorway holding it, eyes suspiciously bright. This is the nicest thing anyone's ever made me, she said. It's just construction paper, Emma said, but she looked pleased. It's perfect. They had dinner together, actual pot roast that Ethan had been working on all afternoon. They talked about Emma's day, about a funny thing that happened at the ranch, about nothing important and everything that mattered. And for just that evening, they weren't a fake marriage or a business arrangement or two people trapped in a complicated deal. They were just a family having dinner, even if nobody wanted to admit it out loud. Christmas came with snow that turned the Montana landscape into something out of a postcard. Emma insisted on decorating the farmhouse, even though Ethan pointed out they'd never decorated this much before. That's because we never had Victoria before, Emma said, hanging paper snowflakes from the ceiling with determination. We need to make it special. Victoria stood in the doorway watching, something unreadable on her face. You don't have to do all this for me. We're not, Emma said matter-of-factly. We're doing it because Christmas should be nice. You just happen to be here for it. Ethan caught Victoria's eye. She smiled, small, genuine, the kind of smile that made his chest tight. They put up a tree together, a scraggly pine that Emma insisted was perfect, despite its obvious defects. Strung lights that only half worked because Ethan had bought them on clearance 3 years ago and hadn't replaced the burned-out bulbs. Made hot chocolate that was too sweet and watched Emma hang ornaments with commentary on each one's origin story. This one's from when I was 5. Dad and I made it at school. The glitter still falls off. I see that, Victoria said, brushing sparkles from her sleeve. And this one's supposed to be a reindeer, but it looks more like a dog with antlers. It's got character. Emma looked at Victoria seriously. Do you have Christmas ornaments? Victoria paused. Not really. My family didn't do much decorating. My father thought it was frivolous. That's sad, Emma said. Everyone should have ornaments. She disappeared into her room and came back with a box of craft supplies. We're making you one, Right now. They spent the next hour at the kitchen table, Emma directing the operation while Victoria tried to follow instructions on creating a felt snowflake that kept coming out lopsided. It doesn't have to be perfect, Emma said. It just has to be yours. Victoria looked at the crooked snowflake in her hands, covered in glue and uneven stitching, and something crossed her face that looked like emotion she was trying very hard to control. Thank you, she said quietly. Emma hung it on the tree in a place of honor, right at eye level where everyone would see it. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ethan found Victoria standing in front of the tree, staring at the ornament. You okay? He asked. My father died 2 days before Thanksgiving, she said. I spent the holiday alone in a hotel room, going through legal documents and trying to figure out how to save a ranch I barely knew. I thought I'd spend Christmas the same way. Ethan stood beside her, and instead you're here with a crooked tree and a snowflake that looks like it lost a fight. Yeah, she smiled. Instead, I'm here. They stood together in the glow of the half-working Christmas lights, not touching, but close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of her beside him. Can I tell you something? Victoria said. Sure. I don't want this to end. Ethan's heart did something complicated. The Christmas season? The arrangement. This. She gestured vaguely at the house, the tree, the life they'd built. Us. I know that's not the deal. I know we agreed to 1 year and then done, but somewhere along the way this stopped feeling temporary. Ethan thought about all the reasons he should stay quiet, about the contract they'd signed and the clear boundaries they'd established, about protecting himself and Emma from getting hurt when the inevitable end came. But he was tired of being careful. It stopped feeling temporary for me too, he said. Victoria turned to look at him. Yeah? Yeah, somewhere between you chasing cattle in a storm and helping Emma with homework and showing up every single day, even when you were exhausted. He met her eyes. I wasn't supposed to fall for you. That wasn't part of the plan. No, Victoria said softly. It wasn't. But I did anyway. She reached for his hand. Her fingers were cold, but they wrapped around his with certainty. What do we do about that? I don't know. The contract says 1 year. After that, we're supposed to divorce and go our separate ways. We could change the contract. Could we? Victoria thought about it. The legal requirement is 1 year of marriage. After that, I have full control of the estate and Damien can't challenge it. But there's nothing that says we have to divorce. We could just stay married if we wanted to. Is that what you want? She looked at him, really looked at him. I want to wake up in this house every morning. I want to keep learning how to run the ranch with Walt yelling at me when I do things wrong. I want to help Emma with her homework and listen to her stories about school. I want... She stopped. I want this to be real. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, something he'd been holding tight for weeks without realizing it. It already is real, he said. It's been real for a while now. Then maybe we stop pretending it's not. He kissed her then, standing in front of a crooked Christmas tree in a house that had seen better days. And it felt nothing like their awkward courthouse kiss months ago. It felt like coming home to something he hadn't known he was missing. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. We should probably talk about this more, figure out what it means. Probably. But right now, I just want to stand here and not worry about contracts or lawyers or what happens next. I can do that. They stayed there until the Christmas lights timer clicked off, leaving them in comfortable darkness. Then Victoria went upstairs to her room, and Ethan went to his, and they both lay awake thinking about the fact that everything had changed without either of them meaning for it to. The next morning, Emma noticed immediately. You guys are acting weird, she announced at breakfast. We're not acting weird, Ethan said. You're smiling at each other more than normal, and Victoria's wearing Dad's flannel shirt. Victoria looked down at the shirt she'd borrowed. It was cold. Uh-huh. Emma poured syrup on her pancakes with exaggerated focus. Are you guys actually married now? Not just pretend married? Ethan and Victoria exchanged a glance. It's complicated, Ethan started. Adults always say that when they don't want to explain things, Emma said. But I'm 8, not stupid. Are you staying or leaving when the year is up? Victoria set down her coffee cup. If it were up to me, I'd stay. What about you, Dad? Ethan looked at his daughter. I'd want her to stay too. Okay then. Emma went back to her pancakes. That wasn't so hard. You're really okay with this? Victoria asked. Emma shrugged. You're nice. You help with homework. You don't try to replace my mom, but you're good at being you. And Dad's happier when you're around, so yeah, I'm okay with it. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds, Ethan thought. Sometimes the truth was exactly that simple. But the legal battle with Damien wasn't simple, and it came to a head 3 weeks into January. The final hearing was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Damien had assembled an impressive legal team, complete with financial experts ready to testify about Victoria's supposed mismanagement. Victoria had her own lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres, who'd been handling the case from the beginning, and a stack of documentation proving the ranch's improved operations. They met at the county courthouse, the same building where Ethan and Victoria had gotten married 4 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Damien was already in the courtroom, looking confident. He'd brought Morrison from the development group as a witness, along with several concerned community members, who Ethan recognized as people Damien had probably paid to show up. The judge, an older man named Harrison, who had a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, called the hearing to order. "This is a petition to review the estate distribution of Harold Langford's will," Judge Harrison said. "Mr. Damien Langford is claiming that his sister Victoria has violated the terms of the will through mismanagement and fraudulent marriage arrangements. Mrs. Cole, how do you respond?" Rebecca stood. "Your Honor, my client has operated the Langford Ranch in full compliance with all legal and financial requirements. The marriage to Mr. Ethan Cole, while unconventional, was legally valid and entered into in good faith. Mr. Damien Langford's petition is based on speculation and personal grievance, not actual evidence of wrongdoing." Damien's lawyer, a slick man named Patterson, stood up. "Your Honor, we have extensive documentation showing that Mrs. Cole paid Mr. Ethan Cole $5 million specifically to marry her in order to satisfy the will's requirements. This is a clear attempt to circumvent the spirit of Harold Langford's wishes. The will specified marriage, not romantic love," Rebecca countered. "Harold Langford was a practical businessman. He wanted to ensure his daughter was capable of commitment and partnership. She demonstrated both." Judge Harrison looked at Ethan. "Mr. Cole, you're here today?" Ethan stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Did Mrs. Cole pay you to marry her?" "She offered me $5 million, yes." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "And did you accept this offer purely for financial reasons?" Ethan thought about how to answer that honestly. "Initially, yes. I was facing foreclosure on my ranch. I have a young daughter. The money was life-changing. But that's not why I'm still here." "Explain." "I agreed to help Victoria save her father's ranch because she asked for help, and I was in a position to give it. What I didn't expect was that she'd become part of my family, that my daughter would come to care about her, that I'd—" He stopped, glanced at Victoria. "That I'd fall in love with her." The courtroom went completely silent. Damien's face darkened. "Your Honor, this is clearly a rehearsed—" "Mr. Langford, you'll have your turn," Judge Harrison said. He looked at Ethan. "You're saying this marriage has become genuine?" "I'm saying it was always genuine. We were honest about our reasons from the start, but somewhere along the way it became more than a business arrangement. It became real." Patterson stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole has a financial incentive to claim the marriage is real. He's being paid millions of dollars. The first installment, yes," Ethan interrupted. "The rest was contingent on staying married for a year, but here's the thing, I don't care about the rest of the money. I'd stay married to Victoria even if she couldn't pay me another dollar." Victoria's eyes went wide. "That's very convenient to say now," Patterson sneered. "Then put it in writing," Ethan said. "I'll sign whatever document you want waiving the remaining payments. The marriage stays intact. I give up the money. If that's what it takes to prove this is real, I'll do it." Rebecca grabbed his arm. "Ethan, you can't just—" "Yes, I can." He looked at Victoria. "I'm not here for the money anymore. I'm here because I want to be." Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Cole, you're aware Mr. Cole is offering to waive significant financial compensation?" Victoria stood slowly. "I am, and I don't accept." Everyone turned to look at her. "Ethan entered into a contract in good faith," Victoria continued. "He's upheld every term of that contract. He helped me learn to run the ranch. He stood by me when my brother tried to destroy my reputation. He's been there for every crisis, every challenge, every moment when I wanted to quit. He earned that money, and I'm not going to let him give it up to prove something we both already know. Which is, the judge asked, that this marriage is real. That what started as a business arrangement became a partnership, she looked at Ethan, became love. My father wanted to know if I'd fight for what mattered. I did. I am. And Ethan fought beside me. That's what partnership means. Damien stood up, his composure finally cracking completely. This is ridiculous. She paid him to marry her, and now they're claiming it's some fairy tale romance. It's fraud, Your Honor. Clear, obvious fraud designed to steal my inheritance. Your inheritance? Victoria turned to face her brother. Dad left the ranch to whoever met his conditions. I met them. You didn't. There is no your inheritance. There's just you being angry that I won. You didn't win. You cheated. I found a solution to an impossible problem. That's what Dad wanted. He wanted to know if I was clever enough, tough enough, determined enough to do whatever it took. And I was. Her voice shook slightly. You spent our entire childhood being the golden child, the son he wanted, the heir apparent, and the second he died, you tried to sell everything he built. I'm not the one who betrayed his legacy, Damien. You are. The courtroom was completely silent. Judge Harrison looked at the stack of documents in front of him, then at Damien, then at Victoria and Ethan. I've reviewed the evidence, he said finally. Mr. Langford's petition alleges mismanagement and fraud, but the documentation provided by Mrs. Cole shows improved ranch operations, sustainable financial management, and full compliance with all legal requirements. As for the marriage, he paused. The will specified that Victoria Langford must be married before the deadline. It did not specify the nature or origin of that marriage. Mrs. Cole satisfied the legal requirement. But the $5 million, Patterson started, is a private financial arrangement between husband and wife, the judge interrupted. It may be unconventional, but it's not illegal. People marry for many reasons: love, companionship, financial security, social status. The law doesn't require romantic love as a prerequisite for valid marriage. Damien looked like he'd been punched. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, the testimony here today suggests that whatever the original motivation, this marriage has evolved into a genuine partnership. I see no grounds to invalidate the estate distribution. He banged his gavel. Petition denied. The estate remains under Victoria Cole's control. This case is closed. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Rebecca was shaking Victoria's hand, congratulating her. Walt, who'd been sitting in the back row, let out a whoop. Emma, who'd convinced Mrs. Patterson to bring her to the courthouse after school, ran up to hug both Victoria and her father. Damien stood frozen, his lawyers packing up their materials around him. He looked at Victoria with something that might have been hatred or might have been grief. I hope you're happy, he said quietly. I'm not happy you fought me, Victoria said, but I'm happy I won. Dad would have hated what you've become. Maybe. Or maybe he'd finally be proud of me. She paused. Either way, I'm done caring what he would have thought. I did this for me, for the ranch, not for his approval. Damien left without another word. Outside the courthouse, the January sun was setting, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Emma was chattering excitedly about the hearing, reenacting the dramatic moments with 8-year-old enthusiasm. And then Dad said he'd give up all the money. That was so cool. That was so stupid, Rebecca muttered. Never make legal offers without consulting your lawyer. But it worked, Ethan said. This time, don't do it again. Walt approached, hat in hand. Mrs. Cole, I just want to say, we're glad you won. The hands, I mean. We were worried about what would happen if Damien got control. Thanks, Walt. That means a lot. Also, you're getting better at fence repair. Slower than molasses, but better. Victoria laughed. High praise coming from you. After Walt left, it was just the three of them standing in the courthouse parking lot, Ethan, Victoria, and Emma. So what happens now? Emma asked. Good question, Ethan thought. They'd spent 4 months fighting to get to this moment. Now that they'd won, the future stretched out uncertain and unplanned. Now we go home, Victoria said, and tomorrow we keep working. The ranch doesn't run itself. But you won. Shouldn't we celebrate? We are celebrating. We're going home together. Emma considered this. Can we have ice cream for celebrating? Absolutely, Ethan said. They stopped at the general store on the way back. bought 3 pints of ice cream that Emma insisted they needed, even though it was January and freezing, drove back to the farmhouse with Emma singing off-key in the back seat and the heat blasting. At home, they ate ice cream straight from the containers while Emma regaled them with more commentary on the hearing and her theories about what Judge Harrison probably thought about everything. When Emma finally went to bed, sugar-high and exhausted, Ethan and Victoria stood in the kitchen, processing the fact that it was over. The legal battle, the uncertainty, all of it. "I meant what I said in there," Ethan told her. "About the money. I'd stay even without it." "I know, but you're getting it anyway. You earned it." Victoria set down her spoon. "Besides, we might need it." "For what?" "I've been thinking. Your ranch and mine, they're right next to each other. What if we combined operations, used your land for part of the herd rotation, shared equipment and labor, ran them as one integrated operation?" Ethan stared at her. That would change everything." "I know. It would mean more work for both of us, but it would also mean better efficiency, more sustainable practices, and a stronger operation overall." She looked at him. "What do you think?" What he thought was that she was talking about permanently intertwining their lives, their businesses, their futures. That this wasn't just about staying married, it was about building something together that would last beyond contracts and deadlines. "I think it makes sense," he said carefully. "But we should talk to Walt, get his input on the logistics." "Already did. He thinks it's a good idea." "Of course you did." Ethan smiled. "You're always 3 steps ahead. I learned from the best. You taught me to think practically, remember?" "Pretty sure that was all you." Victoria moved closer to him. "Ethan Cole, are you saying I'm smart?" "I'm saying you're stubborn and determined and too smart for your own good." "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." He kissed her, there in the kitchen with melting ice cream on the counter and Emma's school papers stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. It wasn't a movie moment. It wasn't perfect or dramatic or anything except real. When they pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. "So we're really doing this?" she asked. "The combined ranches, the actual marriage, all of it? Unless you've changed your mind." "Not even a little bit." "Then yeah, we're really doing this." They stood there for a while, holding each other in the warm kitchen, while outside the Montana winter settled in cold and dark and beautiful. Later, lying in bed, Ethan thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A desperate knock on his door at midnight, a billionaire heiress with an impossible deadline, a contract signed with more hope than certainty. He'd thought he was agreeing to save his ranch, to give Emma a better future, to solve a financial crisis that had been drowning him for years. What he'd actually done was find a family he didn't know he needed. The next morning, Victoria was up at 4:30 as usual. Ethan found her in the kitchen making coffee, already dressed for work. "You know you don't have to prove anything anymore, right?" he said. "Damien's gone. The ranch is yours. You could sleep in once in a while." "The cattle don't care that I won a legal battle," Victoria said. "They still need feeding." Very practical. "I learned from the best." She kissed him quickly and headed out into the pre-dawn darkness. Through the window, Ethan watched her truck's taillights disappear down the road toward the Langford Ranch. His wife. Actually, genuinely, for real, his wife. The thought still surprised him. Emma wandered into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is Victoria gone already?" "Yeah, she's got work." "She always has work?" Emma climbed into a chair. "Are we going to see her later?" "She'll be home for dinner." "Good, I need help with my fractions homework." Ethan made his daughter breakfast, got her ready for school, and handled the morning routine that had been just the two of them for so long. But now it felt different, like they were part of something bigger, something that included Victoria and the combined ranches, and a future that looked nothing like what he'd planned, but better than what he'd hoped for. He dropped Emma at school and headed to his own ranch to check on his herd. The work was familiar, checking fence lines, inspecting equipment, making sure everything was running properly. But now when he looked at his land, he saw it as part of a larger operation, part of something he and Victoria were building together. Walt called around 10. "Boss lady wants to know if you can come by this afternoon. She's got some ideas about the combined operation she wants to run past both of us." "Boss lady?" "That's what the hands are calling her. She doesn't hate it." Ethan smiled. "I'll be there at 2. The meeting was held in the ranch office, Victoria spreading out maps and plans while Walt and Ethan listened. She'd clearly been thinking about this for weeks. She had rotation schedules, equipment sharing proposals, labor distribution plans, all of it documented and thought through. This section here, she pointed at the map, would be perfect for your younger cattle. The grass is better and it's closer to your existing facilities. Meanwhile, we move the mature herd to the north pastures where there's more acreage. Walt nodded slowly. That could work, but we'd need to upgrade the fencing between properties. Already budgeted for it, and if we share the cost, it's manageable for both operations. They spent 2 hours going through the details, finding problems and solving them, building a plan that would actually work. By the time they finished, Ethan was impressed all over again by how thoroughly Victoria had thought this through. "You've been busy," he said after Walt left. "I told you, I don't quit." "No, you don't." She rolled up the maps. "What do you think? Honestly, I think it's a good plan. I think combining operations makes sense both financially and practically, and I think—" He paused. "I think my father would have liked you." Victoria looked surprised. "Yeah?" "He believed in working smart, not just working hard. This plan is both. He would have respected that. I wish I could have met him." "Me too." They drove back to the farmhouse together, arriving just in time to pick up Emma from school. Their daughter climbed into the back seat, chattering about her day, about the spelling test she'd aced and the boy who'd eaten glue during art class. "Why would someone eat glue?" Victoria asked. "Nobody knows. Mrs. Martinez sent him to the nurse." Reasonable response. At home, they fell into the routine they'd developed over the past few months. Homework at the kitchen table while Ethan made dinner. Victoria helping Emma understand long division while the house filled with the smell of cooking food. Small, domestic moments that added up to a life none of them had planned, but all of them wanted. After Emma went to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch despite the cold. It had become their spot, the place where they had the conversations that mattered. "I talked to my lawyer today," Victoria said, "about dissolving the contract." Ethan went still. "What?" "The marriage contract. The one that specified payment schedules and divorce terms and all the legal language." She looked at him. "I want it gone. I don't want our marriage defined by a business arrangement anymore." "So you're not paying me the rest of the money?" "I'm paying you everything I promised, but as a one-time settlement, not installments tied to staying married. After that, we're just married. No contract. No conditions. Just us." Ethan thought about what that meant, about the fact that once the money was paid, there would be nothing forcing them to stay together except actually wanting to. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm sure, are you?" He thought about Victoria covered in mud, chasing cattle through a storm, about her helping Emma with homework and learning to mend fence and standing up to her brother in front of everyone, about the way she'd fought for the ranch with everything she had, about the fact that somewhere along the way, the woman he'd married for money had become the woman he couldn't imagine living without. "Yeah," he said, "I'm sure." She smiled, and in the porch light she looked younger, less burdened, like she'd finally set down weight she'd been carrying for years. "So we're doing this," she said. "For real. No safety net." "No safety net," Ethan agreed. "You're not scared?" "Terrified, but I'm doing it anyway." Victoria laughed. "Same." They sat together watching the stars, two people who'd started as strangers, making a desperate deal, and ended up as partners building a life. It wasn't the story Ethan would have written for himself. It was messier than that, more complicated, full of mistakes and fears and moments when everything could have fallen apart. But it was real. And real was better than perfect. Inside, Emma was asleep, probably dreaming about whatever 8-year-olds dream about. Around them, 2 ranches were slowly becoming one. Above them, Montana stars blazed in the winter sky, the same stars that had been there the night Victoria knocked on his door and changed everything. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For what?" "For answering the door, for saying yes when you could have said no, for giving me a chance when I was out of options." "You gave me a chance too," Ethan said. "I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline disguised as a marriage proposal. We saved each other then." "I guess we did." They went inside together, locking the door against the cold. Tomorrow would bring more work, ranches to run, equipment to fix, challenges to face. But they'd face them together, the way partners do, the way families do. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, sleepy and confused. "Why are you guys standing in the dark?" "Just talking," Ethan said. "About what?" "About how lucky we are," Victoria said. Emma considered this through the fog of interrupted sleep. "Okay. Can I have pancakes tomorrow?" "Absolutely." "Good. Night." She disappeared back to her room, and Ethan and Victoria looked at each other and smiled. "Pancakes," Ethan said. "The really important stuff." They headed upstairs, to separate rooms still, because some changes took time, but with the knowledge that they were building towards something that would last. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling windows and carrying the promise of more snow. Inside, three people who'd found each other through desperation and contract were learning what it meant to choose each other instead. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no guaranteed happy endings, no promises that everything would work out perfectly. But there was work worth doing, people worth fighting for, and a future worth building. And sometimes that was more than enough. Sometimes it was everything. The contract that had brought them together sat in a drawer somewhere, soon to be dissolved and filed away. What remained was simpler and more complicated. Two people who'd learned that the best partnerships often start with honesty about what you need and grow into something you never knew you wanted. Victoria had saved her father's ranch. Ethan had saved his. They'd both saved each other from drowning in their separate struggles. But more than that, they'd built something new. Not a fake marriage or a business arrangement, but a real family forged through storms and legal battles and 4 a.m. mornings and homework help and all the small, unglamorous moments that actually matter. The billionaire heiress who'd knocked on a stranger's door in desperation had found a home. The struggling rancher who'd said yes to an impossible deal had found a partner. The 8-year-old who'd lost her mother had found someone willing to help with fractions and make crooked felt snowflakes. And together, they'd found something none of them had been looking for, but all of them needed. A family. Imperfect, unconventional, built on a foundation of contracts and money and practical necessity, but real, honest, true. And that was worth more than any amount of money could ever buy.